краю нашого неволі, я полкового знамена, дивлюсь на нього я востаннє, у нез'ясованій журбі, всю кров мою всі скидання, воно вібрало у собі.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великой страны.
Найкращий пастух баранячий хотар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні. У нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на ордів образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить. Хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар? Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ. Тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Lviv Street Army sends its regards.
Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, everybody. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 226 of the news.
And of course, we're going to be reporting the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine, starting off on day 226. But before we begin, I got some news that we did not hear last night until after stream. It was Magic Skygirl's birthday. Magic Skygirl has been in this live chat and a member of the Lee Spring Army since the times of the old guard, and from both Matthew and me, we wish you a happy belated birthday. We weren't able to wish you one last night, but we are here wishing you one right now. And so I hope you had a great birthday yesterday. And of course, thank you so much for being an old guard. And so with that, we're now going to be moving. I just butchered that. I hope y'all didn't hear that because I went, but we're going to be moving right into the Kherson area. Speaking about our thumbnail and title, because the Ukrainians have gotten Russian tanks in wholesale today. And so here's the first video of the Ukrainians loading up and shipping away Russian tanks in mass. 1 Russian tank, 2 Russian tank, 3 Russian tank, 4 Russian tanks right here. Yeah, we're turning it to the count. 5 Russian tanks. So, of course, some of them are less intact than others, but the Ukrainians can get these things repaired and running in no time. Just look at all of them. There is literally half a dozen Russian tanks in that one spot on the road, abandoned, nearly intact, just needs a little bit of fixer-upper work, and those things will be back on the front lines and fighting in Ukraine's hands in a matter of days or most likely weeks. With that, we're now going to be moving on into our next video showing off these captured vehicles as well, where we can see them capture an entirely intact Russian tank in this video.
Ay, დედამოწყნულების ტანკი.
See them taking a look at it.
Я беру пидорские сигнальные ракеты, нахуй. А тут все есть, понял, что рядом. ТВМ. Доставить.
А, нихуя себе.
А ну, снимай. Что? Ты снимаешь?
Ага.
Давай ты сфотографируй. А, на этой стороне. Подожди.
See them showing off some of the kit.
Це підорський фотоапарат.
What in the world is this? Is this a site?
Це підорський фотоапарат, нахуй. Їхня нова розробка, понял?
The Cyclops.
It looks like one of those pieces that goes on the like a javelin.
I mean, like, kind of. It honestly looks like a very massive trench periscope. I don't really know what that is. And if y'all know, if y'all know what that thing was specifically, let us know in the live chat, because I would actually like to know what that thing is. Someone said sight scope. I was thinking it was probably a sight scope, but at the same time, he held it in a way. Let me go back real quick and let's look at that thing. When he flips it around, that looks like where you would put your eye. You know, like, because there's like this forehead rest where you can look through the sight. But then again, it could be the other way around. I don't really know. But thank you for sharing that with us.
Підорський фотоапарат, нахуй. Їхня нова розробка, понял?
გუშინ დავადედის პროექტ ესენი. გაიქცნენ ცოტა დაზიანებული კია.
Ты его хочешь забрать? Ты хочешь его
See them
забрать?
having a good laugh as they continue to look at the tank. We can see a Russian flag left on the ground like the trash it is. And another interesting thing, this isn't a T-72B3, this is a T-80BVM, one of Russia's most expensive and most advanced tanks that they field on the front lines in modern war. Of course, well, I've always got to say this after I say something like that. The T-90Ms are incredibly small numbers. They are the most advanced tank out there, but there's only about 30 of them, and I think only about 10 of those were sent to Ukraine at any given time, and one's been destroyed, one's been captured. The T-80 BVMs are about the best advanced thing they have, and of course, the T-14 Armadas, well, they don't really exist at all.
Ага.
You see him taking a good look at it, and it is in pretty decent shape.
Тут буде цей, понял? Коврик, нахуй.
We now see them getting the Ukrainian doormat ready to go, and they're cleaning off their shoes on it.
Так точно. Ай. კაი ტროფეია უკრაინის ჯარისთვის. Wearing the shoe.
And with that, that's the end of the video. And isn't it nice to see that the Ukrainians got a brand spanking new T-80 BVM? It looks like the rear cage was a little messed up over the engine bay, but by and large, not too bad. And so with that, we're going to be moving on into our last video of a captured tank in the Kherson area, where you can see the Ukrainians recovering one from what appears to be some kind of a ditch. Also, this video was sped up, so if the Ukrainians look like they're on some kind of a drug and they're moving incredibly fast, that's because the video's been sped up. And so, here it is. You see him climbing down there, getting onto the tank. Now notice, it was sped up a little bit. You could actually see his feet slide a little bit, and he was getting close to slipping, but luckily he caught himself. You can see it right there. And then climbs into the driver's hatch.
Опять мы с тем злодеем Закарпаття крадем танка, блядь.
That guy sounded like Waluigi. He went, yeah.
Давай, блядь.
Now see them turning on the engine.
Що, поїхали?
Looks like the engine's running okay. And now the tank is slowly backing its way out of the ditch.
Вот так витягують, витягують. Давай, 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 давай. Воруем все время, блядь.
That thing is struggling.
Третю сутку ми витягуємо, сьогодні витяг.
But they got it out of the ditch, and that's what counts. And that shows that this tank, while being in somewhat of a difficult position, was not lost due to it being in rough terrain. It was just abandoned in that location because the Russians were too lazy to try and actually pull the thing out, or they were in too much of a rush to run away from the Ukrainians, and so they just left it there instead of trying to spend the time to get it out. Regardless of how it actually happened, the Ukrainians have captured, on video today, around 8 Russian main battle tanks, almost entirely intact. These two, the T-80 BVM and this one, are completely intact. They're in running order. They even still have smoke grenades within the grenade launchers. On the other hand, the other 6 that we saw at the beginning, some of them did look like they needed a little bit of repairs, and I guess you could say a refitting. Some of the road wheels were missing on some of them, but by and large, those are simple fixes. Road wheels are easy to come by. There's loads of tanks and graveyards all over that you can just pop the wheels off of them and pop them onto the next one. And so the Ukrainians, in these videos alone, got 8 brand new Russian main battle tanks to use in the Kherson area against the Russians. The Russians, of course, have been the largest provider of equipment to the Ukrainians since the start of this war, and I've got to thank the Russian army for helping the Ukrainian army to fight the Russian government. The Russian army has been doing unbelievable work to make sure that the Ukrainians are well equipped, and they continue to do that to this day, like we see right here, just dropping them gifts across the countryside. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from all of the captured tanks, which is a massive amount, and we're now going to be moving into Davydiv Brid, where we can see that the Russians got beat pretty handily here. And this was filmed by none other than the Georgian Legion. And so here's the video. You see them driving through the remains of all these Russian vehicles.
ყველაზე დიდი დასახლებული პუნქტი დავიდბროდი. ქართველი პარტიზანები აქ არიან უკვე. იცოდეს ყველა.
Just driving through a graveyard of equipment.
2022 წლის.
And it looks like they're in one of those buggies. That's really cool. And so that's the end of the video. And you can see that the fight for Davydiv Brid appears, from what we could tell, to be incredibly one-sided, with the Russians largely footing the bill, if you want to call it that. I guess that's probably a nice way to say it. And so with that, we're now going to be moving to the front lines themselves and showing y'all a little bit of what's been happening over the past 24 hours, starting off with some combat wagons. The Ukrainians are starting to use the Doom buggies in massive amounts, and here's a video showing how they're being used. Also, it's got music. Sadly, I got to mute it. But they're all driving down the road in a little convoy. And is that neat or what? They're firing ATGMs off of them.
Wow. It's like they had a flamethrower out of both sides.
Yeah. And they're just barreling down these roads. These things are incredibly fast. They're cheap to make. And they look really cool. They also look fun. See them firing off a machine gun from the top of the Doom buggy. Now see them reloading it. I believe that's an NSV. We can now see them firing off an ATGM. I'm not exactly sure what kind it is. I think it's a Cornet. But you now see them scooting down a dirt road. Once again, little Doom buggies, ATVs like this one, they do incredibly well on almost all terrain like we see right there. It's scooting over that field like nothing.
And these are homemade?
And they are. Most of these have been homemade by the Ukrainians.
Incredibly well built, too, to go over those bumps without falling apart.
I know, right? Like, that's probably the most impressive part of this whole deal. And so with that, we now get an outro card, a really psychedelic outro card that may be giving some of us a bit of an epileptic issue, because honestly it almost gave me one. So with that, we're going to be moving on from that video and into the next one. But before we do, it is cool to see that those Ukrainian homemade Doom buggies are being used to extensive amounts now, especially in the Kherson area. And considering that we've seen loads of raids conducted on Humvees, I'm sure that these little ATVs are conducting raids like no other. It's just that we haven't seen the video footage of it yet. We already know that the strategy of the Ukrainian, I want to call them, and we're going to call them from here forward because it seems historically to be the best description, cavalry raids. They've been conducting a lot of cavalry raids with Humvees, and I'm sure that they're also being conducted with the much faster and much more nimble Doom buggies that they've been making all over the place. And so with that, we're moving on into our next bit of news, where we saw that a Russian grad got obliterated. And so here's the video of this BM-27 Uragan being destroyed. Also, we got it muted. Apparently, there's some kind of a music playing, but we can see the grad down there. It's already smoking, and now it's chuffing. Wait a minute, hang on. Poof. That's a Ukrainian tank. Huh. Well, that adds a whole new level to the story. I thought it actually got hit by artillery, but apparently a Ukrainian main battle tank rolled right up onto this thing and then just obliterated it with a shot straight onto it. Now there's the remains of the Uragan, and pretty good to see. They're knocking out artillery pretty consistently, and it looks like the artillery isn't really doing its job considering that a Ukrainian tank got that close to it. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into the next bit of news in the Kherson area, which shows a T-64 BM2, actually a couple of them, in the Kherson area. We don't know exactly where they are in Kherson, but I do have to say that these T-64 BM2s with the little camouflage netting that they put across parts of it does look really cool. Also, that music is copyright, and so not really. Wait, is that a license plate right there?
It looks like it could be.
I bet it's actually an identification plate of what unit they're in, but still pretty funny. When you see a T-64 BM2 down there, we can also see the barrel of this one. And we can see that T-64 fire. That is a license plate. It's from Alaska.
Wow.
Wow. Imagine
I wonder if that's an Alaskan driving the tank.
Imagine a T-64 BM2 driving around the streets of Anchorage, Alaska, and it's actually registered with the DMV. Like, that would be insane.
Now, seriously, though, I wonder why they put that tag on there like that.
You know, that's actually a great question, and I bet that would be something of great discussion in the live chat. We have no idea why this tank has an Alaska license plate on it, but all in all, I gotta say, it's pretty interesting to know that the Alaskans do have their own T-64 BM2s, and I can't wait to see if these things become available for the rest of the United States market in general. And also, something I was just thinking, Matthew, I was about to whip out a Sam Elliott voice, but I won't, because, some people like it, some people don't, but it's pretty funny to think that this thing's got enough pulling power and torque to actually tackle the Alaskan frontier. And so I think I think it would have a market in Alaska if this thing was sold up there. Anyways, with that, we're now going to be moving on from this little bit of news and on into the next, showing off near Chervony Yar, which this isn't the exact location as far as we know, that a Russian tank was knocked out. It looks like some of the crew was able to get away. Also, they're playing some kind of a siren music. But when you see there something slam into the side of the tank, and you can hardly see it, but when I watched it earlier, I swore that you could see the driver kind of slide out of his hatch, I guess you could say, and then down the front glacis and away and disappeared off film. But still, nice to see the Ukrainians are still hitting Russian tanks. Sadly, we didn't get to see that one go up in a burst of flames, so most likely it was abandoned with a moderate amount of damage, but still would probably be in running condition if the Ukrainians were able to recover it. And so with that, we're now moving on into our final bit of news from the Kherson area on the front line, specifically where we can see that the Russians ended up having a vehicle destroyed by a mortar. So here's the video. And it's a pretty accurate mortar, not going to lie. So you see that little puff of smoke right there? That's a vehicle. No, it's not. Loads of pieces of it are flying into the air. It looks like a direct hit somewhere towards the rear and upper side of the tank, most likely on the engine bay. And the second round looks to have also hit in a very similar spot. Let's see if the third shot, if there is one, lands in a similar spot. No, it just looks like the tank is smoking heavily now. That's never good for an engine's longevity. Always make sure, everyone, to replace the oil in your T-72's engine, as well as make sure to remove the mortar fragments from the engine bay itself. And it should have a pretty long lifespan, but of course, if you ever run into a road obstacle called the Ukrainian army, the tank most likely won't survive. So always make sure to avoid that obstacle, as it's very bad for keeping your tank healthy and running for an incredibly long time. You won't get a lot of mileage that way. And so with that, it's great to see that the Ukrainians used a 120mm mortar to put a decent amount of damage onto a Russian tank. We don't know if it burned down afterwards or if the crew abandoned it, but still, I gotta say, it's pretty cool to see that the 120mm mortar got close to what we can tell, knocking out a Russian tank. Speaking about the conditions of this area of the front line, we do not know if the Ukrainians have made any ground today, but one thing that we are certain of is that the offensive is still going on strong in this area. We're hoping to see that the Ukrainians continue to make ground, but of course, due to operational security reasons, we're not going to say exactly where that will happen or why, but I will tell y'all that they are in a pretty good position to continue their advance as far as I can tell, although I could be wrong. Just because I say that stuff doesn't mean I'm right every single time. Moving on down, however...
Also, real quick, very interesting, Roy Hughes actually looked up the license plate off that tank, and it actually belongs to a 2018 Jeep Renegade here in the United States, so very interesting.
Jeep Renegade. 2018 Jeep Renegade?
Yes, I think so.
I think he's wrong because that's not the car we saw in the video.
It might be a little different.
I think they've gotten some aftermarket modifications on that Jeep Renegade because it just doesn't look like this anymore. I mean, not at all. I mean, what do you think, Matthew?
It doesn't look the same, and I definitely know it doesn't sound the same.
I know it doesn't. I mean, honestly, I got to tell you, thank you so much for getting that information for us. But I think someone needs to call the DMV in Alaska and tell them that they need to go and check the roadworthiness of that vehicle, considering it was purchased as a Jeep Renegade, and now it appears to be a highly modified aftermarket Jeep Renegade. That may be against Alaska's road laws, and I think that's something that we need to look into and take care of as fast as possible. But of course, with that, I thank you so much once again for letting us know, and that is really cool. In all seriousness, moving on from the little joke, that is probably someone from Alaska that did drive a Jeep Renegade that was like, oh my god, I love what the Ukrainians are doing. Maybe they have family over there, and they sent them their license plate from their Jeep Renegade and was like, wouldn't that be cool if you put it on a tank? And then they did. And honestly, that's a really cool tribute from those tankers to this person, whoever they are, that owns this Jeep Renegade. And so with that, thank you so much once again for letting us know that little additional tidbit of information. And with that, we're moving on into our last bit of news from the Kherson area, which shows a little bit of an issue in Dniprovsk, where we saw the Russians got obliterated today by some very precise artillery. Here's the video. Also, we hear some music. When we see here a Russian vehicle in Dniprovsk, Oh, you know, that tank was so far in the tree line at that point, it almost looked like the trees blew up themselves. Like some Wile E. Coyote stuff. But a very interesting video to see, and it's nice to know that the Ukrainians can get a precise hit on any vehicle, however deep or far they are into a tree line. And it's good to know that the Russians are now no longer safe, even on the southern bank of the Dnipro River. We actually had a great question a night or 2 nights ago from one of our viewers asking if the Ukrainians actually did push the Russians out of the northern Dnipro River banks and back towards the south, wouldn't they be under the threat of artillery fire from the other side of the river? And that's a great point. But as we can already see right there, the Russians are already falling victim to what looks like conventional artillery fire on the other side of the river. And so it is a bit of a tit-for-tat kind of thing, or a double-edged sword. The Russians will be able to hit the Ukrainians on their side of the river, but the Ukrainians will also be able to hit the Russians on their side of the river, most likely more effectively, considering that they have more advanced and longer-range artillery systems provided by the West, which they could use to outgun the Russians during that kind of engagement. And so with that, I hope that circles back and addresses that a little bit better, because that was a really good question. And also, that is all the news we have for the Kherson area. Of course, massive amounts of news, huge amounts of exploits and successes by the Ukrainian army, and hopefully there will be only more as time goes on, and we will hear of only more victories. Speaking of which, these victories have been quite large and happening more towards the later end of September and the early end of October. And a lot of people have been wondering, why? Why did it happen so early? Some people actually thought, like me, that these offensives would most likely begin in mid-October, yet they started about 2 weeks in advance, I guess you could say. And so this has left a lot of people wondering, why is that the case? But the simple answer to me was that was because the Ukrainians were already well enough prepared and supplied without the brand new Lend-Lease coming in mid-October, where they felt comfortable enough to start these counterattacks. And they didn't just feel comfortable enough, they were comfortable enough to start these counterattacks. But if we go to Russia, we'll see that an entirely different story is starting to coalesce about why these counterattacks happened at this exact time. And believe it or not, they say that the Ukrainians started off these embarrassing counterattacks at this time of year to ruin Putin's birthday. You wouldn't believe it, Matthew. That's actually what they're saying. And so here's the video. Due to the subtitles being at the very bottom of the screen, I'll have to read over our favorite propaganda master from Russia, because I think they'll be cut off about halfway for y'all. But here's the video, and I'll be reading it all for y'all. Also, quick note before we continue through the whole thing, we won't be able to watch all of it because it is a whopping 7 minutes and 58 seconds long. This isn't the Russian Propaganda Master show. This is the Enforcers News channel, and so we're going to only show about 3 minutes of it at the start. So here's the video. Andrei Viktorovich. It's obvious that today and tomorrow will be extremely intense days, that the enemies will attack from all directions. Their goal is to ruin the Russian president's birthday. They like symbolism. Today, War Gonzo reports that they've already entered the territory of the Luhansk People's Republic. This was an achievement where we... Wait a minute. Hang on, let me go back. This guy's talking so fast to be looking so depressed. This was an achievement where we previously said that at least we completely cleansed the Luhansk People's Republic. Everything has to be rechecked. It's very worrisome. Very worrisome. Americans are already openly saying with this tempo they're going through the Kherson region. They can take over Crimea by the New Year's. God, wait a minute. This guy is saying this stuff on Russian TV? Man, this guy's lost all hope. Like, he doesn't even believe in the Russian army anymore. He's like, the Americans are saying with confidence they can do it, and at this point, he's not even putting up a rebuttal to it. Right, they're being crammed out. Over here, we have some panic discussions that they're doing well. They have a network-centric warfare. They have AI. They see no... Wait a minute, what does this guy think? It's Cybernet or something from the Terminator? They got AI that's winning the war for them? I mean, oh, come on. Like, this is sad. Anyways, and we don't have anything. What should we do? How do we equalize the situation? Which measures should we implement right now? I would certainly not succumb to panic.
Oh, wouldn't want to do that.
From what's going on in the information space. Perhaps they are conducting a wide-ranging info op. Yes, of course, that's what they're doing. Trying to mislead us about various issues. Everything should be studied under a magnifying glass. Any normal leader is not going to announce specific dates and especially the directions of those strikes that are taking place. These contours are emerging and we understand them, so you feel more calm. Reinforcements and reserves are coming. So we'll hold it until we build up our strength. I don't know why I'm talking like William Shatner, but in order to reclaim the initiative. Either way, we first have to prepare the mobilized resources that we have, which we can't. We have to create new subdivisions, divisions, and units. That will take time, as we previously discussed. Formation and relocation will take no less than 2 months, although we see the conscripts being shipped out right now, and they're already surrendering on the front lines. This guy is just speaking bull. We have to be ready for this. During this time, we have to maintain a line of defense and not allow the enemy to advance further, to inflict maximum casualties, to flush out all of their existing reserves. Wait a minute, how in the world did this guy sit there and go, Matthew? Because did you notice that when the propaganda master man said that the Russians were losing, this guy said, well, I wouldn't believe that. We need to go over all of this with a fine-tooth comb and a magnifying glass to make sure that that's what's happening. And then when he's saying all of this, he admits that they're losing and they're being pushed back, and they need to start setting up defensive lines and trying to inflict as much casualties as they can over the amount of ground lost.
This guy is just really a scholarly Russian.
Yeah, he's a really scholarly guy. Also, if you look at his house, it's all made of wood. Like some kind of a, I don't know what to describe it as, like that Soviet-looking like poplar wood that they put in like Typhoon-class submarines. And he's got some books, some fine china maybe.
But seriously though, Enforcer, like, is this their new approach to act scholarly and intelligent now? Before they were just acting sensational, and now they're resorting to trying to act like they're book smart about the whole issue.
Yeah, I mean, like literally book smart too, is they're now trying to get backgrounds and rooms that have books in them to make them look a little bit more well read. But I think this is a response to the Ukrainians blowing away their lines, and so now they have to try and be far more serious about the issue, because there's no way that they can go about all of the sensationalism and high talking, because the Russian army isn't even performing in Ukraine. So how in the world will a threat be taken seriously that they'll extend this war into Poland or the Baltic states? And I think that's why they've taken on this more serious and scholarly tone. And so with that, we're going to continue this and preferably crush them all so there's none left. How are you going to do that when you haven't done that yet? Basically, we should arrive to that time with a ratio of 1-to-1 with the existing forces. We should create strike forces and reclaim the initiative. These issues are elementary to any military man. Well, apparently not, because the Russians haven't mastered this in 8 months of war. Where are they? Come on, I mean, if this is basic, how come the Russian generals haven't mastered this kind of thinking? Either way, we should work on critical infrastructure. And not just spontaneously, here or there. We need a precisely formulated operation. Striking, all month long. In 2 months, we can shut down the Ukraine issue. I love how still victory is just in reach. It's just around the corner. They haven't won anything for the past 8 months. They only won stuff in about the first month of the war, and then after that they were constantly losing. They've never won anything from that point forward that was actually meaningful. This guy is still sitting here with this mindset. It's okay, the 3-day special military operation that's going on for 8 months. Give it 2 more months and we'll win. And also, another thing, we're going to pause this here and move on from this little clip, but let's break down what this guy just said. Did y'all notice that he said focus on their infrastructure? But he then moved on to not say Russian infrastructure. He then talked about attacking Ukrainian infrastructure. And I can tell you this, they're trying to bring on some guy that acts like an expert here, much like all experts around the world. This guy's statements are ill-placed, and they're not even looking at the serious issue, which is obvious to all of us. The Russians could probably put up a much more decent fight if they just gave their soldiers supplies. Stop focusing on counterattacks and trying to strike back at them or create extraordinary defensive positions. when you don't even have the food or the ammunition for the soldiers to achieve any of those objectives. These people are stupid. I don't even know how these guys on Russian state TV can pretend like they're scholarly or anything, when even they, trying to act as intelligent as they are overlooking the basic issue of what are soldiers even eating. They're not eating anything, and they're still focusing on the abstract, like what are we going to attack tomorrow, and what are we going to defend tomorrow? If you don't even have soldiers that are alive and they starved to death yesterday, there's no point in focusing on tomorrow. And so with that, that's the end of the video, and we're going to be moving on out of Russia because we can only have so much Russian state-sponsored stupidity on this channel before we feel like people will most likely develop some kind of gray matter in their brains. And so with that, we're going to be cutting that video off right there, but you can tell the Russian state TV is once again added with the dumb assumptions and also the silly statements. And so we're now going to be moving back into Ukraine to be covering our location unknowns and also our northern Ukraine news. But before we get to all that, we're going to take a quick pause to address 3 questions from the chat and also address our polls as well. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so we do have 2 polls to go over, and the first one said, is Russia Ukraine's primary supplier of weapons? 80% said yes, they are very generous. 14% said no, they are not. And 6% said, I do not know. Now, for me personally, I think Russia is being very generous with their shipment of new tanks and weapons to Ukraine. It seems like the Russians are trying to compete with the United States to give them as many free weapons as possible. So good on them for that. But not much credit for anything else. But Enforcer, what are your thoughts?
I have to say, the Russians have really been a top supplier of equipment to Ukraine, mostly indirectly. That's never been their goal, but in the end, due to incompetence and poor training, that's almost always the end result of what happens with Russian equipment, is that it falls into Ukrainian hands and the other half ends up destroyed. And so for that reason, I would have to say that they don't get, like Matthew said, a lot of credit for really anything else, but one thing you can give the Russian army credit for is giving the Ukrainians the ability to keep on fighting. At this, honestly, with the rate that Russian equipment is being lost and captured by the Ukrainians, the West could probably curtail a decent amount of support and the Ukrainians could sustain their units. And I'm not saying that this should be a thing that's done. I still think that the Western equipment is far superior in quality and we should continue to send as much as we can. But hypothetically, I think Ukrainian units could probably sustain themselves on captured equipment alone at this point instead of needing Western equipment, although I still view Soviet equipment to be far inferior, and I would much rather see a Ukrainian unit using an M777 than a D-20 or something similar. And so with that, I hope that addresses that poll, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next poll said, why do you think the Alaska tag was on the Ukrainian tank? It looks like 55% said it's Alaska Volunteer Soldiers tag. It looks like 15% said a random car tag for the tank. 17% said tribute from a family member, and 14% said none of the above. So quite a few of you think that it's actually a volunteer soldier's tag that he brought with him to go fight in Ukraine. Now for me, I'm kind of like torn in between all 3 options, but I guess I would have to go with the majority if I took a guess. But Enforcer, what are your thoughts?
I would have to say it could have been an Alaskan Volunteers flag, but I haven't seen a lot of Foreign Legion members or foreign volunteers in tanker positions. Usually they're in infantry, but then again, there's always a decent chance out there that one of them may be operating a tank. It's just that, here's my thing though with that one. If it's a volunteer from Alaska, it's safe to assume that they live in Alaska. They're probably an American-born citizen. And so if they ever served any time in military service, they would have been in the U.S. Army or the Marine Corps. And they would have been operating some version of the M1 Abrams, whether it was the M1A1 or the M1A2 or the M1A1HC or all the other versions that we have out there at this point. It would have been one of those. And so I don't know if he would have the skills that are transferable from an M1 Abrams of a sort into a T-64, but that's actually a good question. Can an Abrams tanker operate a Russian tank? Let's see, are Russian tanks better than the Abrams? That's a funny question. Oh man. Let's see, what is the best tank? Apparently We don't get an answer for this, but real quick, if we can take just a moment here, everyone, to appreciate these questions. I want to look at the answer to this one. What is currently the best tank in the world? A very objective question, because depending on who pays you to give an answer...
Or subjective.
Yeah, very subjective question. That's a much better way to say it than objective. That's the wrong word. But let's see what the answer is. The German KF-51, the top 10s today... The German KF-51 Panther, which is a prototype. The M1A2, which is in service. The T-14, a prototype. The K2, now that's one that doesn't get a lot of credit. The K2 Black Panther. Have you seen that one, Matthew?
I think it rings a bell, but I can't remember.
The South Korean main battle tank?
No, I've definitely never seen that.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting one. It kind of looks a little similar, honestly, to a Type 10 from Japan, but these things are pretty cool. I've seen them a decent amount every once in a while, and I like them. What do you think about it?
I think it looks all right, but I've seen better ones.
All right. That actually is a pretty good poll, a pretty good poll question. Let's see. Then you have the T99. Well, I guess they're talking about the T99A, which I'll show y'all real quick. A very interesting tank, actually. It's this one. That is a Type 99A. It's heavily upgraded. It's, of course, just like most tanks. It's a normal Type 99, like a T-72, that's been heavily upgraded with explosive reactive armor packages. Pretty interesting, but not a lot.
Now, unfortunately, I will have to say about this one, for some reason, there's something pleasing about the design on it. I'm not sure what it is. I know it's from China, so we're not supposed to like it. But it's actually somewhat of a decent design.
I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not that big of a fan. And here's my reason. And it's not just because it's Chinese. It's because of this weird wedge-shaped hull that slowly inclines as it goes backwards. If you look at a tank like the Abrams, it does this a lot more pronounced, which I think is better looking, in a way. As you can see here, that where the turbine engine in the Abrams is, there is a large hump on the rear of the hull.
Oh yeah, of course. The Abrams is always going to be the king tank, but still, the Chinese design has a little merit to it.
A little bit. That's actually a really good question for the live chat as well. And a poll is, what tank looks the best? The M1A2, the Type 99. What other tanks do they have? I know this is a little bit of a rabbit hole, but it's just such an interesting one. The Leopard 2. Okay, that one's pretty decent, but if you know anything about the Leopard 2's service in Turkey, you'll actually know that a decent amount of Leopard 2 A4s were destroyed by the Syrians, so that was a little interesting. The French Leclerc, I think that's a 60, the Leclerc 60 in Roman numerals, or the Leclerc Extra Large, as we would call it in the United States. The Challenger 2, oh man, have you seen the Challenger 2?
No, I haven't.
Challenger 2, we'll pull up the TES version, the Theater Entry Standard, which is what they would have gone into, like, I guess you could say, Iraq or Afghanistan looking like. There is a Challenger 2 Theater Entry Standard. Here's one that was actually over there. And that's
pretty cool.
Yeah,
it's pretty low.
Actually, these things are massive compared to an Abrams. They're bigger. I think these are actually the largest main battle tank in terms of overall height and length that are in service today. It's just that it looks really low to the ground, probably because of this little flap thing near the bottom of I guess you could say the explosive reactive armor. But I gotta say, honestly, the Challenger 2 is one of the best looking tanks in the world. It has a very nice aesthetic design to it. And then the last one on this list of note. Well, actually, there's two, but we'll skip the Japanese one and go to another one, actually. The Merkava 5 from Israel, which is an interesting one. Merkava 5. Very odd-looking tank. It's got this giant UFO-shaped turret on it. Very interesting.
Yeah, I don't like that.
But oddly enough, this one is kind of cool because it has, I believe, both air conditioning and a water tank with cooled water in it, and like a little straw at each station that the crew can drink out of, so that way they don't die of heat exhaustion in the middle of the desert inside of a steel box. And then the final one, it's of course says Type 90 for Japan, but I would say that the Type 10 is a little bit better considering it can be transported around the mainland of Japan instead of the Type 90, which is relegated to Hokkaido only. But the Type 10 is a pretty cool looking tank. It was one of the newest tanks in the world, actually.
Overall, Enforcer, I have to say that the United States makes the coolest looking tank, and right behind them are the Germans. I love German tanks. They're really nice designs, too.
Like the Leopard 2 A6?
Yeah, I really haven't seen a German tank that I don't really like.
I mean, it's a neat tank. Okay, now that one does look really cool with the camo netting.
They're
on it,
just
gotta admit.
very aggressive and bulky looking. It's cool.
Yeah, and I can't lie. The Germans do make a really cool looking tank. I mean, like, who can't say that the Leopard 2A5 is probably one of the coolest tanks out there, but just by design, not by performance. But anyways,
A tank should really be intimidating looking. It should be, and I think the German tanks accomplish that pretty well.
I think they do actually. You got a pretty good point there. A lot of their stuff does, but that's a rabbit hole for another time. Anyways, with that, I hope we addressed that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right. So, real quick to go over the poll that I just put up. Do you think the Chinese T-99 has a good design? It looks like 43%. We're actually tied here for no, I don't like it, and yes, but somewhat. Each one of those options have 43%, and it looks like 15% said yes, I really like it. So for me, I'm going to fall within the yes, but only somewhat camp. But it looks like pretty interesting results. What do you think, Enforcer?
I would actually have to fall within the 42% that says they don't like it, because I honestly I mean, like, it's an okay design. It's not the worst out there, but it's also not the greatest in my opinion. I think there is a lot of room for improvement, at least in terms of the aesthetic design of the tank. We don't even know about its performance because we've never, interestingly enough, the Chinese rarely get involved in wars. The last one they were involved in that was of considerable size would have been the war against Vietnam, right after the Vietnam War, sometime in, I think, 1979 to 1980 was when the war occurred. And that was the last time that they ever had a war. So we've never seen any of their modern equipment perform on the field. And how well does it actually do? And honestly, considering that, it probably doesn't perform all too well. Anyways, we are moving on to the next one. If we have another poll, and if not, we're into the live chats.
All right, so that was our last poll for the moment, and just trying to catch up here real quick on the super chats. This is what happens, folks, when I weigh in. I always get behind. So let's see real quick. Let's see. I think we're good to go. So let me reorganize the spreadsheet real quick to have them top to bottom. There we go. All right, and up first for our super chats, we have a $100 donation, very generous, from BC Skyman, who says, please answer 2 questions in the chat. Thank you, my friends. Slava Ukraine, and keep it up, Enforcers.
And thank you so much for the support, BC Skyman. We will answer 2 questions in the chat, and thank you so much for helping this channel to keep on running. Once again, I thank you. Yes, you actually sent in 2 tonight, and I thank you so much for your massive generosity and helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, we are on to the live chat questions sponsored by BC Skyman and, of course, Slava Ukraini.
All right, and the first one, which is sponsored by BC Skyman, goes to John Klaus, who says, are all of the bridges out that could provide supplies to the Russians?
All of the bridges in the Kherson area specifically are out. Apparently they are, well, they're intact in a way. People can walk over them. So I guess you could say they're now pedestrian bridges. They've now been degraded to that level of quality, but they no longer have the structural integrity to carry the load that a truck would have or a tank. So in that regard, unless if they were going to start pulling out little red riding wagons and start pulling the supplies across the bridge that way, there's really no easy way for the Russians to ferry the supplies across the river, unless if they were to use a ferry. We already saw one of them get destroyed. It was the one near Kherson that was being operated, the only one at the time. But we haven't heard any updated news on whether they got a replacement ferry for that one or anything like it. So they may have another ferry that's sending over a small amount of supplies, but by and large, all of the bridges in this area cannot be used to transport any supplies, and in that regard, they have been knocked out. And so with that, I hope that answers that question, and we are on to the second live chat.
All right, and the second one goes to Otubes, who says, did you hear about some Russians helping fight on Ukrainian side? Also, some Russians asking the U.S. for asylum in Alaska.
I actually did hear about the Russians seeking asylum in Alaska. We didn't cover that news today because I was waiting for a little bit more information on that story. But I did hear about that. And also, can you reread the first part of that one, Matthew?
He asked about the Russians that were helping to fight on the Ukrainian side.
There are. Yes, we have actually covered them before. It's the Freedom of Russia Legion. We haven't heard a lot about them recently, but back in the day, during the Battle of Kharkiv and other similar times in that period of the war, we heard a lot about them, and they apparently were fighting quite well. And so with that, I hope that answers that question as best we can, but sadly, we haven't heard a lot about them recently to figure out their fate or what they're doing right now. But with that, I thank you so much once again for sponsoring those two live chats, BC Skyman. You are a channel legend, and that was incredibly kind of you to sponsor two other people's live chats. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and next up, we have a $60 super chat from Mark, the Orc X Sanguinator, who says, please don't sing Happy Birthday to Magic Sky Girl.
And I don't think we will. It's pretty tough for us to sing. We don't really have singing voices. We have more so radio talking voices like Matthew. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. And if you or a loved one has been diagnosed with mesothelioma, you may be entitled to financial compensation. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again, Mark the Orc X Sanguinator, for supporting this channel through and through. Once again, for being a massive legend. You've gone down in the pages of history in this channel for being the largest supporter of a fundraiser during a single night. Narya, as far as I know, is the largest, I guess you could say, donor to fundraisers overall in the amount that has been given over time. But in a single fundraising stream, just a single one, you were the largest donor ever. You sent in something like $20,000 US last fundraiser, pretty much accounting for half of what we raised that night. And I gotta tell you again, thank you so much for being so kind and so generous and helping out all of those Ukrainian soldiers that will, in the end, get their medical support, treatment, and rehabilitation from revived soldiers of Ukraine. And due to the massive amount of support, I'm sure a lot of them will receive that treatment. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and I think this is the last one of the segment, and it's a big shout out to BC Skyman once again for putting in a $50 super chat, this time without a comment. But BC, as we said earlier, thank you very much for your support. You've always been here for a very long time, and you've always been very consistent in supporting the channel, and we do appreciate it very much. And Enforcer, would you like to add anything?
Yes, I would like to thank you so much once again for helping out this channel. That support, of course, I go through this spill every time. I know that it must get old, but it helps us to feed ourselves, it helps us to keep the lights on, and helps us to pay for tuition in college, which these days isn't cheap. And it keeps on getting more expensive. And so I thank you so much for helping us out and helping us to be able to keep doing this as a full-time job. And so thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, I believe that was the last one of this segment, if I'm correct.
That was it.
All right, and so with that, we're now moving on into the location unknowns and the northern Kharkiv area to cover the news there. Starting off in the location unknowns, where we saw a wounded Russian. This is not a graphic video by any means. It just shows a Russian that appears to be pinned down under some kind of a wall. The Russian actually asks, as the caption says, to be offed. He asked for the Ukrainians to just kill him, and the Ukrainians said, well, we're not like y'all, and they didn't kill him. They ended up getting him out from under the wall, taking him as a prisoner, and most likely trying to help him recover his leg, which was actually a huge sign of humanitarianism, especially from the Ukrainians at this point in the war. And so here's the video.
Это кто бросил?
Кто бросил гранату? Наши бросили? Вы что, на приколе? А, за углом?
Еще один
You
едет.
see the Ukrainians here?
Ракету готовь. А ну, прикрывай, давай я его. Куда ушли? Туда? Тварина, блядь. Ну что ты,
You
сука?
see the Russian right here. You can see that the wall is a little on him. Of course, it's not graphic or anything. You know, you just see that the wall's on him, but he's just sitting on top of this tank.
Отрежу сейчас. Так, пацаны, надо один, чтобы со мной прикрыл с огорода.
Слушай, добей, а.
Блядь, легко нахуй. Страшно?
Добив?
Не.
And to be clear, this fellow
Давай,
is still
залезь туда,
alive.
прикрой,
Yes.
с огорода его вытащи. Мы ж, сука, не вы, долбоёбы. Что? Так, мне надо прикрыть, оттуда прикрой.
Давай, я поверху.
Сука, пидор, где оружие, блядь? Там. Где там? Вась.
He's passed out for now. I did watch the entire video to make sure. He's passed out at this moment, I guess, because of the shock, you know, of having like a wall fall on your leg. But he will wake up in a bit once they kind of like drag him out of there, and he will say what I said earlier. And then, you know, they'll say, nah, we're not going to do that.
Although, Enforcer, when he shot that gun a second ago, it looked like he reacted to it.
He may have. But when you now see them trying to help this guy and get him off the wall.
Куда ранен? Тварина, куда ранен? Откуда сам? Сам откуда, блядь?
All right, and now you see right there he is talking. Just to clarify, okay? He is not dead, and there's nothing graphic about this. It's just some guy sitting on top of a tank with a wall on his leg. And while that does seem kind of odd, it is, of course, safe to show. We always try and make sure to clarify that as best as we can, because we always try and make sure to follow YouTube's community guidelines about what is not age restricted.
Быстро. Кострома. Кострома, блядь, в моем Купянске ебучем.
Блядь, я врач.
Какой...
Wait a minute. I think this is the moment where the guy said, just finish me off. And so the guy like pretty much like socks him in the head. He's like, you idiot. We're not doing that.
Кострома, блядь, в моем Купянске
Ай,
ебучем.
блядь, я врач.
Какой ты нахуй врач?
Врач,
А
блядь.
что ты людей убивать едешь?
Не убивал я никого.
Да расскажи мне, блядь.
Ай! Ай!
На бетаре, блядь, он, сука, пидор ебучий. Вытаскивай на... все, чувак.
Я врач, блядь.
Ну, короче, тебя зажало, тебе пиздец. Его не достать. Пока бэху не отдай.
Чого не достати? Та достане.
Не-не, ну нога.
А, його привалило повністю.
На, блядь, держи. Врач.
Його треба, блядь, вирівняти.
Был бы ты врач, нахуй. Ты б сюда никогда в жизни не приехал мирных убивать, блядь. Долбоёбин.
Убивал я мирных.
Да расскажи мне, сука, сказки ты на бетере здесь, блядь. С оружием, нахуй.
Руку показывал,
Now
блядь.
you see him cutting off the
Здорово,
armor
нахуй.
plate.
Сука.
And that's the end of the video. And a pretty interesting look. Of course, it wasn't exactly the most amicable of exchanges, but it still is nice to see that the Ukrainians are taking care of the Russians when they do fall under, I guess you could say, their authority, or I guess you could say under their care, I guess is the best way to say it. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into the next clip of Location Unknown News, where we saw a grad get obliterated by none other than... well, actually, sorry, correction. The Ukrainian grad blasted a Russian SPG battery, and so here's the video. Also, music. When you see the little SPG battery moving across the field, and the grad's just peppering the entire area. Looks like the little SPG battery is still continuing to move, although some of the grad rockets have gotten incredibly close to the little battery. In fact, it looks like some of the vehicles may have stopped moving at this point. So with that, that's the end of the video. Once again, a really interesting look at a grad barrage. Now, of course, grad barrages, by and large, regardless whether a Ukrainian artillerist is the most accurate in the world, there is no way to really make a grad barrage accurate. It's an MLRS system. You know, it's an unguided rocket. Those things will just go wherever they go. But it was still largely directly centered right onto that little SPG battery that the Russians were trying to move so desperately. And it looks like some of the SPGs may have sustained some damage, although it looks like about half of them made it through probably without getting touched at all. And so with that, we're now moving on to the next clip of Location Unknown News, where we saw another Russian tank get destroyed. And in the words of that guy, I forgot his name. It's like some DJ fella. I think he said another one. When you see the Russian tank right there, when you hear some music, but there's the tank, and there goes the tank. The tank is no longer there. It's like a disappearing act. And so we can now see a little fire breaking out on that tank, and now we get a really cool outro card by the Ukrainians. Really cool one, actually. And with that, that's the end of the video. Nice to see that the Ukrainians are still knocking out Russian tanks, although we can't really tell where they are. On to the next bit of Location Unknown News. We can see a Ukrainian soldier that drove a motorcycle with a sidecar through a field, and Gotta tell you, Matthew, you know how I've been saying the Rasputin is coming?
Yes.
Well, this guy experienced it firsthand. Here's a video of him and the whole motorcycle drenched in mud. It's just soaking in it.
Is that a motorcycle with a sidecar?
Yeah, it's a motorcycle with a sidecar. You can hardly even tell because it's covered in so much mud.
For a minute, I thought it was one of those motorcycles, like those like three-wheeled motorcycles, the Can-Am things. I couldn't tell.
No, I don't think they drive those. But also something real quick, Matthew. Doesn't this look like that Jurassic Park dung pile that they had to search for the radio receiver in?
How do you remember that?
I don't even know, but for some reason that flashed me back to that. Jurassic Park. I know we can't get copyrighted for this because we're saying this with commentary on that specific scene in the show, so it does fall under Title 17. Jurassic Park dung pile. There we go. Images. Yeah, it does look like it, doesn't it?
A little bit, yes.
Yeah, a little bit. And of course, it's crazy to see, and of course shows the Rasputin is coming into season. Of course, it's a seasonal thing. It happens in the spring and fall every year, and this is about the best proof you can ever get that it's here and it's finally arrived. The ground is so slushy that just driving this motorcycle around can get you covered in almost a mountain of mud. And so with that, we are on to the next clip, and of course, a really funny one. It looks like everyone got a good laugh out of this, and this guy really deserves a shower for driving through these kinds of conditions. Also, I hope that motorcycle's okay, because that thing is just covered in it. With that, we're moving on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see a BTR firing at the Russians. It's always good to see a little bit of a firing, and it's nice to see that the Ukrainians are firing a normal BTR at the Russians. So let's watch. Also, without the music. We can see them inside of their BTR. Once again, a clean interior, showing the professionalism of these troops. We can also see this guy here. Honestly, Matthew, for some reason, he looks like I don't even know how to... For some reason, he looks... What in the world am I trying to think of? Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. He looks like...
Oh, no.
No, this isn't offensive at all. He actually has a pretty nice... He looks like a nice fella. But he looks like that one... dwarf. I forgot his, he had the white beard. He was like the nicest one in the group. I forgot his name. He was the one who would check out the diamonds. If you know what I'm talking about, I forgot the name of that one.
Yes, I think so.
Someone in the live chat probably knows the exact dwarf I'm talking about. But this guy looks a lot like him. Not a bad look. It makes you look nice and inviting. So with that, here's the video. He's talking to the camera. We can see him put the cigarette back in his mouth. And now he's showing off the controls of the BTR. Wait a minute. He looks like Doc. Yeah, that's it. That's the guy. Yeah, thank you, everyone, for agreeing with me. He did look like Doc, and that was kind of cool. And so with that, that's the end of this video. Once again, cool to see Ukrainian BTR in action, and cool to see that even the Snow White and the Seven Dwarves are getting involved in this war, as now Doc is over there. And actually, now some people are throwing out other stuff. Someone said Gandalf. I don't know who Gandalf is. I know who y'all are talking about, but I don't really know exactly what he looks like. Let's see. Someone said Papa Smurf. Oh, come on. But someone said Doc. Someone said Angry. I would say it's Doc. Doc seemed like the coolest dwarf of them all in that movie, and also this guy looks like a pretty cool dude too. And so with that, that's the end of this video, and we're now going to be moving on into the next clip. We're going to check out some M113s that have been so generously provided by the West, and we can also see some BRDM2s mixed in amongst them. And look at those little armored boxes. Of course, the M113 isn't the most impressive thing that you'll ever see on the modern battlefield, but it does help get troops from point A to point B, and I guess that's all that counts at the end of the day. You see them driving around. Of course, 50 cals on top of these things just look huge. And with that, that's the end of the video, and it's just nice to see that these little things are moving on from place to place all over the front lines. Of course, transporting troops from point A to point B about as efficiently as you can. And so with that, we are on to the next one, where we can see a helicopter flying incredibly low over the battlefield. In fact, I think this thing is going to be taking off people's heads if it got any lower. And you'll see what I mean. It's only a 2-second clip, so watch it quickly. It's going to pass by as soon as it gets here. That is too low. That is way too low. Gosh. Let's watch that one more time. I think it doesn't have any music either. Ooh. But with that, that's the end of that video. And of course, I see that everyone, I'm sorry, everyone. I'm very sorry. I gotta address this real quick. Everyone's saying that they're disappointed in me, that I don't know who Gandalf is. I'm very sorry, everyone. I never really grew up watching TV or shows or anything, so I never really got to know any of it, old or new. And so it's kind of...
And also, we haven't watched The Lord of the Rings, to answer your question, JB.
Yes, we haven't watched The Lord of the Rings, at least not that I can recall. But we may try and add that onto a list somewhere to watch. But I'm sorry I'm disappointing everyone right now. Once again, I don't know a lot about modern pop culture. I know a lot about this stuff, history and all that, but I don't really know a lot about the other stuff. Maybe by not getting into pop culture, I was able to learn about this because I had the time, but I don't really know. I will try and get into it, though, since so many people are like, oh my god, how do you not know? And so with that, let's see, you don't read either, huh? Well, I do read. It's just that I don't read that kind of stuff. I don't read fictional stuff. I usually just read nonfiction. And so with that, on to our last bit of Location Unknown news. We can see what's going to make Matthew drool. Matthew's a bit of a car guy, and he's also one for drifting. The Ukrainians were drifting this M777 like no tomorrow. Also, note the muddy and terrible conditions of this dirt road. The Rasputitsa is here. Also, Matthew, just to make sure you get the picture of what's going on, I'm going to play like 2 seconds of the music. All right, so now that you know,
it's that Tokyo Drift music.
Yeah, and look at this thing. Oh gosh, it's just getting covered in mud, and it's just drifting all over the road.
He's sliding it.
Oh man, and oh my gosh,
pretty cool. I would rate it a 5 out of 10.
Yeah, I would rate it a 6 out of 10. Honestly, really cool look, but. No, actually, I'll have to go in the other direction. I'll rate it a 3 out of 10. Because it's cool looking to see this thing drifting, but at the same time, oh, it's getting covered in mud. It's going to be cleaned. Oh, man. You know, that's going to be a pain for these soldiers that are operating this M777 to have to go and clean this thing. And so with that, we are now moving on into the next bit of location. Well, actually, that was our last bit of Location Unknown news. Sorry about that, everyone. We're now going to be moving on from the Location Unknowns and on into the northern Kharkiv area, starting off in Drovchina, where we saw that a Stugna hit a Russian tank, courtesy of the 92nd Mechanized Brigade. Video took a second to load. Of course, it's just getting the Stugna into the chamber. And so, here's the video of them taking out this tank. You can see the Russian tank moving along the tree line.
Стань, сука, пидор, стань. Спустился вниз, ебать. Да сейчас, подожди, это еще не все. Нужен встать где-то, блядь.
You can see them just getting ready to fire.
Не, по-другому, другому. Она в землю ушла, блядь. Не, она летела, на поле пролетела нормально. Я ее видел, я же пошел туда. Смотрю, она летит, и все, вот. Она пропала, блядь. Видишь башенку? Башенку он видишь?
You can see them having a bit of a conversation as they continue to watch the tank.
Выстрел!
But we could see right there, right before they even said Vistral, we could see that they were already lifting up the reticle so that way they could fire the Stugna without it running into the ground. The Stugna is now fired, and there it goes, whisking on its way towards the Russian tank to slam right into the side of it.
Есть!
Есть!
Есть! Слава Украине, сука! Да, сука!
The tank's now burning, and with that is the end of the video, and it is really cool to see that another Russian tank has gone up in flames courtesy of the 92nd Mechanized Brigade, which has knocked out another one with the venerable and most revered Stugna. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from this little bit of news and on into our next, further down the northeastern front, closer to Petropavlivka, where we saw that a Russian Humvee had a little bit of a cook-off. I think I may have put that down wrong. Yes, I did. It's not a Russian Humvee. For some reason, when I was writing this title, I must have been thinking about Humvees, and so I put Humvee in there. It is not a Humvee. It is some kind of a little Russian, like, supply car, but it gets slammed by artillery. And so here's the video. See it moving on down the field cheerily. A mortar round hit near it, and just it hitting that close to that vehicle, it started to fire. We can see it's heating up pretty quickly now. We can now see Russians running for the hillside as that thing is about to explode. And so that's the end of the video, and it's good to see that a mortar round closely placed near a Russian staff car or some kind of vehicle similar to it can cause the thing to go up like a ball of fire. With that, we're now going to be moving on into the next clip of news further down the road, where we saw a scared Russian in a basement. Now, of course, when you watch Ukrainians under artillery barrage, they usually just wince for a second, and they're just cool as a cucumber. This guy went through the 5 stages of grief, and then he tried to act like he was entirely fine with the whole thing and just laughing it off at the end. And so here's the video, and I gotta say, it's funny to watch him try and play it off after looking at his facial expressions, and so here's the video. What were these facial expressions?
He was scared to death.
Yes, he was. Let's watch that again.
He looked like a goblin for a straight 2 seconds.
Yeah, wait a minute. I don't know a lot about about modern pop culture, but I know about that gremlin thing that says "my precious," and that guy looked like that for just 2 seconds during that barrage. He was like, "Where's the ring, my precious?" Oh gosh. And then after all that, he immediately tries to play it off.
Прицельно бьют прямо по нам.
And then he tries to play it off right at the very end still. But I gotta tell you, those facial expressions were definitely not someone who was calm and collected and had nerves of steel during that barrage. That reaction afterwards was a recovery of face because he was filming himself during it, and he was like, "Oh crap, I gotta try and recover somehow." But I gotta tell you, that's definitely not what he did. Why did he hold his neck? Like, why was he holding his neck? That's like the weirdest part of the video. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from this and on into the next clip of news in the area, closer to Kucherivka. Of course, I want to make this clear. Of course, the markers are not entirely accurate, especially the Ukrainian ones. We always throw them off a little bit, most likely by like at least 15 miles or 20 miles, so that way we don't show exactly where they are. But this was taken somewhere in the area, as we see the Ukrainians driving through the remains of what was once a Russian fighting force. And this footage was taken from inside of one of those nice BTR-4s. Destroyed Russian vehicle, destroyed Russian main battle tank, turret toss, another tank that was completely missing a turret. You can see another BTR-4 in front of him. The Ukrainians really did some work making those cool BTR-4s. I mean, they just look mean. With those little armor cages around them that are supposed to break up like a RPG round or something similar. But with that, that's the end of the video. And it's great to see that the Ukrainian armed forces are rolling through areas that the Russians have been holding for months and just leaving a wake of destruction on the Russian armed forces in the background. And so with that, we have now covered almost all of the news in this area, but we're going to move down to Kryilivka, where we saw that a grad got hit down here as well and destroyed. In fact, all of the videos that we've seen today have gone to indicate that more grads have been destroyed on this single day than any other day in the war. So it's Grad Day. It's International Grad Day here in the Least Spring Army, and here's a video of this grad getting blitzed. We can also hear some classical music play as we watch this grad get blown up. Believe it or not, y'all, classical music is actually copyrighted. Some of y'all may be thinking, well, the copyright holder, like Beethoven, for example, with this specific song, he's dead. He's been dead for hundreds of years. How in the world can there be a copyright on it? And you're right, his copyright's expired, but the piano player who played that song has a copyright to it, believe it or not. So we can't play the classical music even. But we see the Grad now having cook-off after cook-off. The rockets are firing right along the tree line. Something that I guess you could say is not necessarily ideal. We now see the Grad sitting there still, churning and burning, as they usually do. And I did say Beethoven earlier, didn't I?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. Because I've seen some people saying it's Beethoven. I was like, did I say something else like Bach or something like that? I was like, hopefully not. But with that, that's the end of the video, and it's great to see that the Ukrainians are still obliterating Grads all over the place. And so with that, it's now time for us to move on into our next segment of news. Further south in the area.
Don't we have to get to a second question segment?
That's correct. I was actually segueing into that right now.
So what do you know?
Yeah, and so without me going through the whole segue into it, I'm going to let Matthew take over with the polls, and then after we address the polls, we're going to be going on into the live chats. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, folks, and we only have one poll to address this time, and the question is, do you think the U.S. president's speech today indicates a stronger stance on nuke use by Russia? It looks like 39% said yes, NATO is taking a stronger stance. 40% said they did not hear the statements. 14% said somewhat, maybe, and 7% said no, it does not indicate that. Now, if you didn't hear the statements, basically the U.S. president warned of a nuclear Armageddon. So to me, it seems like, yes, NATO is going to start taking a stronger stance, which is a really good thing because like me and the Enforcer were debating last time, I think we need more deterrence. But Enforcer, what are your thoughts?
I would have to agree with that, of course. We have said that before, and some people may be getting concerned, and it is good cause for concern. We are now getting closer to the brink of nuclear war, but at the same time, the closer we get to the brink of nuclear war, usually the farther away we are than ever, and that kind of sounds weird. It almost sounds as a complete opposite of the situation, but if you look through history, at historical instances of when nuclear weapons were being threatened outright, like the Cuban Missile Crisis, you'll actually see that in the end, that got us further away from nuclear war than really any other time in the Cold War. In fact, that moment there ensured that really we wouldn't go into nuclear war for the remainder of it. In case of y'all didn't know, the Russians, the Soviets, didn't agree to withdraw the nuclear weapons just because they were scared of the United States. It was actually a joint agreement in between the Soviet Union and the U.S. that if the Soviets removed their nuclear missiles from Cuba, the United States would remove our nuclear weapons from Turkey. In case you didn't know, Matthew, we actually had nuclear weapons in Turkey that could fly into Russia pretty much at a moment's notice at the time of the missile crisis.
And yes, I did know that because actually in my foreign policy class, we're actually watching a movie on that exact event.
Really?
Yes.
That is really cool. I actually didn't know that. And I hope y'all didn't know that, so at least I was telling a fun fact to someone. So with that, I hope that addresses the poll fairly well. I did hear the statements today, but I feel that obviously, of course, these kinds of threats and warnings are more so taking a stance, and I think it's much better to take a stance than to let Putin just run freely with his threats and act like he can get away with it. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and it was the only poll for this segment, so we're moving on to our super chats. And up first, we have a very, very generous $250 donation from Mark, the Orc Exsanguinator, who says it looks very like World War II German motorbikes in World War II in the Rasputitsa.
And I would say so. I would certainly agree with that. And also, thank you so much once again for the support. It is starting to look like Rasputitsa, just like in World War II. Let me pull one up for y'all. Rasputitsa. Rasputitsa. There we go. Or Rasputitsa, like I spelled it the first time, and then Google's like, didn't you spell it the other way? And I didn't. But anyways, Rasputitsa. Oh, look, it's the Germans, and they are literally in a field of slush.
Poor horse.
Yeah, and I feel sorry for the horses. The horses went through hell on earth, usually most of the time through war. And also, did you notice this, Matthew? This picture was taken in 1942, and the Germans are hauling supplies with horse and wagon.
Yeah, and exactly. Is that in Germany?
No, this is actually in Kursk. This is near the area of Kursk.
Huh, that's weird. There's like nothing in sight for like miles, it looks like.
Yeah, and if we pull up Kursk, it's a lot like that to this day, actually. If I can... Oh, the Kursk submarine disaster, another shining moment in Russia's history. But Kursk, the city in Russia. With Google, you always have to spell it out. Kursk, city in Russia. It's like it's simple or something. But we go out here, and we click down on this road. Yep. And we go here. Nothing. It's like pretty much nothing. In fact, there's a fire going on out there. But largely nothing. Honestly, it's a lot like Wyoming with how flat it is, or Kansas. And that's what the Germans faced. In fact, Germans hated going into the Eastern Front due to two reasons. It was a slaughterhouse for both sides. And second, there was absolutely nothing to do out here. Like, nothing. Like, the Germans were actually bewildered with how undeveloped the large portion of the Soviet Union was as compared to a country like Germany or France, which had a lot going for them at the time. The Soviets, you could just go through hundreds of miles of ground and there would really be nothing out there save the occasional village or maybe the major city like Minsk or Kyiv. And so with that, yeah, it does look like there's nothing out there. And another thing, quick little fun fact for y'all. The German army almost had no engines during the Second World War. The large portion of their army, something like 90 to 95% of them, still relied on horses only, and they didn't even have a single motorized vehicle in their entire unit. The whole entire thing relied on horses. That's something that a lot of people don't really know, and I think that's something that should be taught in the history books a little bit better, is that Germany didn't really have the massive amounts of tanks like a lot of people believe they did. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. Also, y'all can see here, this is in the Volgogda Oblast, or Volgogda Oblast of Russia, and you can see the Rasputitsa in this village here, and the ruts it's creating just by a lightweight car driving over it. That's how slushy the ground becomes. And so with that, I hope that addresses the comment fairly well, and it certainly does look like Rasputitsa even in World War II. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and up next, we also have a generous $50 super chat from William Allen, who says maybe the Alaskan veteran drove those at Fort Irwin, California, as part of the OPFOR.
Maybe so, maybe. And that would actually be interesting to find out as well. I think we ought to do a special Lee Spring Army initiative, if anyone can, to find out why that Alaskan license plate is on that tank, because I would actually be really interested to know. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and next up, which I think is going to be our last one of the segment, it goes to Mark, the Orc Exsanguinator, once again, who puts in another $40 donation and says, why do you think the U.S. is not giving Ukraine a whole passel of Phoenix CWIS? It seems perfect for Iranian drones. And Mark, I agree with that 100%. They need to have some of those because those are very, very lethal and very effective, and I love them. They're one of my most favorite weapons. So I'm with you on that one 100%.
And I would have to agree with you on that one as well. It would be crucial to have these CIWSs placed around strategic locations in some of the major cities like Kyiv and Odessa, because they could intercept these Shahed 136s before they can reach their target. And so I would have to say the same question. Why hasn't the U.S. started to send those over yet, or at least get into discussions of doing that? They are a little expensive, but I'm sure that the Ukrainians would be willing to lay down actual money and pay it as a bit of a debt or some kind of a loan to get these things if we, for some reason, didn't find it economically viable to just send them over and pay for them. But I entirely agree with you. Those things should be in Ukraine, and they could defend some of the cities that are being hit the worst by these Shaheds, like Odessa and Kyiv. And so with that, I hope that addresses the question fairly well. Well, actually, the comment fairly well, because I would entirely agree with that statement. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And we are out of this question segment. We've actually answered 3 questions, believe it or not. And so we're going to be covering the final bits of news of this war in Ukraine here in the northern Donetsk area, and also the southern front, which we only have 1 bit of news from. And then we'll finally be moving on to the speech from President Zelenskyy. Starting off in the area of Makivka, where we saw that the Ukrainians attacked the Russians again today. Nothing new, but it is still good to see that it looks like progress is being made. These are Ukrainian soldiers. It looks like they're I guess you could say movement of them is sped up. The entire video looks like it may have been sped up. And they're just calmly advancing onto this Russian position in the tree line. We now see the drone getting a different angle as these Ukrainians now attack the tree line. You can see them laying down and firing into it. Very interesting view. We now see some other kind of RPG explode. See more explosions occurring on the tree line. Looks like that Russian position has been beaten up fairly well. We now see the drone looking at the Russian position again. It appears the Ukrainians are still, I guess you could say, in the area and making sure to keep the position, I guess you could say, eliminated. We now see them getting up one at a time and starting to withdraw after conducting a successful attack on this outpost. It doesn't really look like much is left. So with that, that's the end of the video, and a pretty interesting look at nighttime operations of the Ukrainian army. Moving on into our next bit of news from the area, in the area of Turney, which makes me assume that this may be a little bit of older news. But then again, I do have to say this. Our front line is a little inaccurate in this area. We have made sure to give the Ukrainians a lot of leeway and took a lot of artistic liberties with this front line several days ago. Mark, the Orc Exsanguinator, actually brought it up at one point, but of course, this is in an attempt to make sure that operational security is kept. And of course, if this was a Russian push, we would be updating these front lines as accurately as possible and showing exactly where the Russians are. But with the Ukrainians, we do take some liberties in some areas, specifically this specific part of the front line, to change things around just a little. So sorry about that in advance, everyone. That is why this part of the map is inaccurate. So the Russians may be in this area still, but I can't really say for certain. But we can see the Carpathian Sich Brigade slamming a couple of BM-21s in this area, pretty much grads. Here's the video. We can now see them cooking off, a couple of rockets firing here and there into the grounds around them. And the grads are still burning. Insurance doesn't cover these. We now see another one in that tree line. And with that, that's the end of the video. Once again, pretty interesting look at the Russians and their grads getting turned into, I guess you could say, a burning cinder. With that, we're now going to be moving further down the line. Of course, we don't know of the progress that the Ukrainians have made in this area, but we do wish them the best of luck and hope that they take the ground that they rightfully own. We're now going to be moving down to the area of Hurivka, where we saw that the Ukrainians are literally eating cake. And here's the video. And of course, he's mocking a Russian soldier that said, "We survive as best we can," earlier in the war, as they're eating a literal cake out of a tin.
Ну, так питаються Збройні Сили України. В общем, выживаем как можем.
And they got a whole cake over here! A literal... Okay. You've won a war when your supply line is transporting actual cakes to the front line. You've won. That's the way this works. That's the way war works. In case y'all don't know, nearer to the end of the Second World War, the Japanese were actually incredibly surprised because a lot of them were supply-wise in similar situations to the Russians that the Russians are in now, and they were blown away to figure out that the U.S. had an entire transport ship that specific purpose was to ship ice cream, and it was to ship ice cream to battleships and the Marines on the islands and things like that. And whenever the Japanese heard about that, it did have a demoralizing effect because it showed how poor off they were against their opponents. They were literally eating ice cream, and they were eating whatever they could find. And this is about the point that the Ukrainians have found themselves in. The Russians have to buy their own food in the military. The Ukrainians literally get supplied a cake. It's over. They've won.
В полях жить неудобно. С едой не всегда все хорошо. Ну, что делать? Война.
And so with that, that's the end of the video, and I gotta say, that is a pretty funny one. I don't know about you, Matthew, but if you're able to supply soldiers an actual decent-looking cake that still looks spongy and fresh, your supply line's got to be top rate right there to be able to fit some of those in.
Yes, indeed.
And so with that, we're now going to be moving on out of this area and further down towards Zolotarivka and Verkno-Kamyanka, where we saw that the Ukrainians were able to capture a Russian Strelitin. Both sides operate these. Wait a minute, hang on. This caption is now changed. We now have to move this down into Kherson. So we've located that to Verkno-Kamyanka, but apparently they've changed the caption to say Kherson, and I trust the captions a little bit better. Hopefully this person did their research and found it was in Kherson. So we're circling back to Kherson real quick. They captured a Strelitin.
Збивати наші... Да, збивати наші ненависні кацапські самоліти.
And with that, that's the end of the video, and I like to see that the Ukrainians have now gotten themselves a fresh, brand new Strelitin. We're now going to be moving on into the next bit of news, and of course, back up towards the area of Bila Orivka for a second. We haven't heard of any frontline advances in this area, but it does appear that there is a small amount of activity occurring, mostly in favor, well, almost entirely in favor of Ukraine. We're now going to be moving down to the area of Yakovlivka and Soledar, the Gift of Salt, as you all know the name of that is, where we see the Russians pushing forward. And this post was sadly deleted. Yeah, we're going to be seeing in that video some Russian tanks moving through a field, and then of course they start getting hit by AT weapons, and then hurriedly retreating and nearly running over each other to back out of the field. But sadly, that video for some reason was deleted, and so unfortunately I can't show it to y'all. And so with that, of course, there has been no advances by the Russians in this area today. The Ukrainians still hold the line, and that is also true for Donetsk as well. The front line still holds. However, down in the southern front, where the front line is always stagnant, and it still is today, there was this one small amount of action in the area of Staromlivka, I believe it's how it's pronounced, where we saw a T-72B3 explode. And here's, it's like a silent picture. We see the tank. Now we don't see the tank. Pieces are flying all over the place. The smoke cloud is rising. And I think that tank's out of action. And so with that, that's the end of that video. And it's nice to see that the Ukrainians are still destroying Russian tanks down in the southern front. Although we haven't seen any frontline changes for the longest time. And so with that, we have now covered all of the news from around Ukraine, both high and low, north, south, east, and west, and we're now going to be heading to Kyiv to cover the speech from President Zelenskyy here on day 226 of the war, and that will be wrapping out tonight's news segment and bringing us on into the question segment. And so without further ado, here is President Zelenskyy's speech.
Українки, сьогодні у нас день активної дипломатії. Інформуємо партнерів про чергові прояви російського терору, про ракетні удари по Запоріжжю та інших містах України, про застосування іранських безпілотників проти наших людей та інфраструктури. Іран чомусь стверджує, що їх у нас немає, люди їх бачать у небі, ми їх збиваємо, а нам кажуть, що їх нібито немає. Що ж, знайдемо способи, щоб їх дійсно не було. Інформуємо і про наш рух на передовій. Тільки за час від 1 жовтня і тільки на Херсонщині від російського псевдореферендуму було звільнено і стабілізовано понад 5000 квадратних кілометрів території і десятки населених пунктів. Є успіхи і на східному напрямку. Обов'язково настане день, коли ми прозвітуємо про успіхи і у Запорізькій області, у тих районах, які поки що контролюються окупантами. Настане день, коли ми скажемо і про звільнення Криму. Ця перспектива очевидна. Очевидно і те, що цим шляхом ще належить пройти. Ще належить багато витримати, багато зробити. Зробити і українцям, і нашим партнерам, усім, хто цінує свободу і міжнародне право. Поспілкувався сьогодні з представниками політичних, бізнесових та експертних кіл Австралії. Відчув повну підтримку, зацікавленість у нашій перемозі. До речі, Австралія входить до топ-10 країн, які надають нам оборонну допомогу. Це дуже вагомий внесок у захист нашої держави, міжнародного правопорядку і людяності як такої. Звернувся до провідних європейських лідерів на саміті Європейської політичної спільноти, що відбувся сьогодні у Празі. Закликав їх зробити все для того, щоб цей наш новий формат співпраці у Європі, який об'єднує різні держави від Ісландії до Азербайджану, від Іспанії до Туреччини, міг стати не просто об'єднанням політиків, а об'єднанням миротворців. Європа потребує спільноти тих, хто уміє захищати мир і ставити на місце будь-яких терористів. Цими днями Європейський Союз рухається до запровадження 8-го пакету санкцій проти Росії. Зокрема, в цьому пакеті передбачається обмеження морського транспортування російської нафти і створюється інструментарій для обмеження нафтових доходів держави-терориста. Це добре, але це тільки початок. Маємо зробити так, щоб держава-терорист не отримувала жодного прибутку від продажу нафти і газу, щоб жоден нафтодолар і жодне газоєвро більше не могли піти на продовження російської війни проти України і усього цивілізованого світу. Впевнений, з часом це буде забезпечено. І я дякую усім європейцям, усім у вільному світі, хто працює заради цього результату, хто просуває необхідні політичні рішення і хто створює необхідні економічні альтернативи російським енергоресурсам. Завтра продовжу роботу на цьому напрямку, буду звертатись до учасників засідання Європейської Ради. Сьогодні у Києві зустрівся із Самантою Пауер, керівницею Агентства США з міжнародного розвитку USAID. Обговорили наявні і перспективні програми нашої співпраці, реалізацію нашого плану швидкої відбудови України. Головний наголос цих програм – це безпека, і ми скоро представимо суспільству цей новий безпековий підхід до нашої цивільної інфраструктури. Подякував пані Пауер за виділення коштів для підготовки нашої інфраструктури до зимового періоду, зокрема для теплопостачання. Провів сьогодні ж зустріч з керівником МАГАТЕ Гросі, який прибув у Київ. Зрозуміло, що наші переговори стосувалися передусім ситуації на захопленій російськими терористами Запорізькій атомній станції. Але насправді ця тематика значно ширша. Вона стосується не тільки України і не тільки в контексті радіаційної безпеки. Звичайно, будь-які рішення поточного керівництва Росії щодо Запорізької станції і будь-які намагання Росії перевести станцію нібито у свою власність є нікчемними. І, відверто кажучи, глупими. Це ж атомна станція. Це ж вам не який-небудь там палац, не ЮКАС чи щось інше, що вже вдавалося вкрасти російському керівництву. Тільки українські спеціалісти можуть гарантувати, що на Запорізькій станції не буде жодних радіаційних інцидентів. І було важливо почути від пана Гросі, що міжнародне співтовариство буде контактувати щодо ЗАЕС тільки з Україною, бо це українська власність. Була, є і буде. Зараз на станції близько 500 окупантів, а це не що інше, як 500 ризиків катастрофи. Світ це розуміє. Я дякую за підтримку усім, хто бореться за повернення повного українського контролю над станцією і за її повну демілітаризацію. Інший аспект цієї теми – власне, електрика. Якщо Запорізька станція не працює, ми в Україні отримуємо певні складнощі. Отримуємо ситуацію, коли в нас немає профіциту електрики, яку ми можемо, зокрема, експортувати до країн ЄС. Це мінус і для народів ЄС, які втрачають надійне джерело енергопостачання. Це мінус і для нас, українців. Ми говоримо про це чесно, ми говоримо чесно, що нам усім в Європі треба разом боротися за свої інтереси у повній єдності. Я дякую усім, хто допомагає Україні, я дякую усім, хто воює і працює заради нашої перемоги. Слава Україні!
And with that, That is the end of President Zelensky's speech here on day 226 of the war in Ukraine, and that also rounds out our news segment as well. If you are here for the news alone, I thank you so much for watching, and if you are new to this channel, I highly suggest that you subscribe. We run these streams every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, except for Mondays. And so, of course, please make sure to subscribe if you want to keep appraised with the news. This is one of the places you can do it. And so with that, we're now about to be moving on to the questions segment and answering all of the super chats that have been sent in tonight that haven't been answered yet, as well as as many live chats as we can. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
Yeehaw!
Dang, that sounded really
that
stressed.
was a struggle. That was a struggled yeehaw. But anyways, moving into our one poll of the final segment here, we have a question that says, do you think the nuclear crisis with Russia is reaching Cuban Missile Crisis levels of severity? 46% said no, we aren't there yet. 29% said yes, the nuke threat is severe. And 25% said somewhat maybe. Now on this one, I'm going to have to fall within the 29% that said the nuke threat is severe. I think it's starting to climb up toward levels of the Cuban Missile Crisis personally. Because Putin could use one over there any day now. There's no set time frame on him using one. And it appears, based on the comments from the United States, that there may be something going on behind the scenes that we aren't aware of yet, but might become aware of very soon. But Enforcer, what are your thoughts?
I would have to say it's not that serious yet, because one thing I can say about the Cuban Missile Crisis is that nuclear threats were being thrown around like they are right now from both sides, but at the same time, the United States got incredibly close to, I guess you could say, a conventional war with the Soviets at the same time as we used the U.S. Navy to blockade Cuba and even depth-charged a Soviet submarine into surfacing. So we haven't gotten to that level yet in terms of the conventional aspect of things to have it escalated to the point of the Cuban Missile Crisis. But I would say, considering the U.S.'s threats coming out today, it's now not just the Russians with the one-sided nuclear threats. Now the United States is also starting to get up there and get ready to go to bat at the plate, I guess you could say. And so with that, I hope that addresses the poll fairly well. And with that, if we have another one, then we'll answer that poll. And if not, we'll move on to the questions.
All right, so moving into our super chats, we have one from, once again, Mark, the Orc X-Sanguinator, who puts in a $35 donation and says, remember that Ukraine T-64 we saw killed by 2 Russian tanks. I saw the whole video. Major Russian attack with tanks, BMP, etc. The T-64 stopped the whole thing. Then infantry ATGM'd 2 to 3 retreating Orc vehicles.
Can you reread that one again real quick? Because I think I may have missed it.
Okay, Mark says, remember that Ukraine T-64 we saw killed by 2 Russian tanks. I saw the whole video. Major Russian attack with tanks, BMP, etc. The T-64 stopped the whole thing. The infantry ATGM'd 2 to 3 retreating Orc vehicles.
And we did see that one actually later on after that first video we saw, and that is true. It was just, I guess you could say, an edited clip to make it look like the Russians ended up coming out on top. But if you watch the whole video, that is true. The Ukrainians actually did win it. And we did show that on stream a little while ago. Now, real quick, Matthew, just to let you know what I was distracted by there. I was actually looking at Joe Dirt because you hit him. And I was like, I went back and looked. I was like, those comments weren't that bad. I was like, kind of true. So then I unhit him. And then he literally just copy and pasted one of the old comments and put it back in. And then I went, Stukna. And then got rid of him again.
Yes.
So that's what distracted me. But sorry about that. And with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. Pretty good comments, I must say. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $25 super chat from Livy Washington, who says, thanks for being awesome. Here's to the Donut and Coffee Fund. Do you agree with the United States president saying that we're closer to nuclear Armageddon than we were in the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis? And how close do you think we are? Slav Ukraine. And real quick, we did have a poll on that just a second ago, which I need to close out in just a second. But I'm not sure exactly if he said that we're at levels higher than the Cuban Missile Crisis, because I wouldn't say it could outdo the Cuban Missile Crisis. It could be as severe, but probably not outdo it. But it looks like the Enforcer is pulling that up right now.
Let's see. So we'll use CNN real quick. Now I gotta say this. CNN and Fox are about my most unfavorite news sources out there. I feel like they're almost just entirely politically charged, but we'll read them real quick just to get a try and get a quick synopsis. First time, apparently this is a quote from the president. First time since the Cuban Missile Crisis, we have a direct threat of the use of a nuclear weapon if it in fact things continue down. What? If wait a minute, oh, apparently I misread. If in fact things continue down the path they are going, we have a direct threat of the use of a nuclear weapon if in fact things continue down the path they are going. So it's not saying that it's getting worse. It seems that it seems that the president is suggesting that it's getting close to the times prior, and in that regard, I would say this is getting there. I think the Cuban Missile Crisis is about the closest that we publicly know that we were about to get to nuclear war, but there were a couple of times behind the scenes that nuclear weapons were about to be launched within minutes. There was actually a time when a Russian sensor failed and it picked up clouds, cirrus clouds, very high up in the atmosphere over the northern Arctic, and the sensor reported it back, the radar reported it back, that those were U.S. intercontinental ballistic missiles that within minutes would strike the Soviet Union and destroy them. And so the Central Command, all the way up to the premier of the Soviet Union at that time, gave the order to fire. The battery commander refused the order, and thank God he did, or else nuclear obliteration would have began right there. It was figured out minutes later after he refused the order that he had done the right thing, as those missiles were not missiles, they were cirrus clouds that were in the exact same position they were in minutes ago. So with that, I hope that addresses that question fairly well. Livy Washington, isn't it? I think it's Washington.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I was just trying to make sure. I hope that does address it fairly well, because I think that he's saying that it's getting there, but it hasn't gotten all the way up there yet, at least according to what this post from CNN is saying. And to also address that, in my own opinion, I think this is starting to get towards that direction, but it will take the United States scaling up its conventional response in this area to make it get onto Cuban Missile Crisis levels. I don't think we're there yet, but I think that if things continue to escalate in between the U.S. and Russia, we may get there within the next few weeks, or maybe a month. And so that... Oh, and also another thing I'd like to say, hopefully we don't. Of course, this is a bit of a natural escalation. It most likely won't lead to nuclear war. But at the same time, it is necessary to try and get some kind of negotiations going and get this thing stopped, considering that it's certainly going way too far. And also, these threats will ensure that Russia will most likely not use nuclear weapons, as they won't want to face nuclear Armageddon, most likely. And so with that, once again, I hope that answers the question fairly well, and we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support, Livy Washington. It helps us out a lot, and that was a really good question.
And also, real quick, I saw Karen Vaughn saying in the live chat that the United States has bought over $290 million worth of anti-radiation meds. And yes, Karen Vaughn, that is true. We did purchase that. However, I will say that doesn't necessarily indicate that there's going to be a definite use of nuclear weapons. The U.S. Likes to usually try to be proactive and get things under control before they actually happen. So they're probably just planning for a worst case scenario like we do on pretty much everything. But I don't know, maybe the enforcer has a different take.
I actually would have to somewhat agree with that one. It seemed to be somewhat sensible, and also I was reading the live chat, so I didn't really hear it all too well. But with that, I was actually looking at something interesting in the live chat here. I hate to jump off of that and into this, but someone actually said, and I'm trying to find it again real quick. Okay, I was wanting to address this real quick. I just remembered. Holly Fortis said, sounds like the president doesn't think it's there yet, since he said if things continue. And it got silenced by the Nightbot. And I would like to explain this real quick, because some people may get timed out. They may be like, hey, what in the world's happening? And just real quick to explain it, we don't allow politics on this channel, and for that reason, the Nightbot automatically goes through and deletes messages with the president's actual name in it, and that also applies to prior presidents as well. So, you know, of course, I don't even have to name them. Hopefully, y'all know the prior presidents in modern history. So that way we can make sure that people don't come in here and go, President A or former President B or so and so, they suck or they're great, and or something like that. It helps us to avoid politics. So if you do want to say something about the situation, make sure to type in the president or something similar, so that way we can make sure to avoid, by and large, the people who come in and want to stir up the political pot here in the United States. And so with that, once again, I'm sorry to see that happened to you. I just wanted to let you know now. Hopefully it helps out in the future. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Santiago Flores, who says, Ukrainians have counter-moved the Russians. First, the victory parade, signing for the NATO membership and declaring no talks with Putin. And now, in Ottawa, Canada, an election was held to annex the Russia embassy. Classy no.
And I thank you so much for the support. And also, I would definitely have to say that, and can you reread that first part? For some reason, they're slipping my mind at an unbelievable rate. I'm actually going to have to close out the second window so I don't get distracted by the live chat and just to answer the question. So, can you read it again?
Yes, that one from Santiago said, Ukrainians have counter-moved the Russians. First, the victory parade, signing for the NATO membership and declaring no talks with Putin. And now in Ottawa, Canada, an election was held to annex the Russia embassy. Classy? No.
And thank you so much for the support, Santiago Flores. And to address the first parts, I think the Ukrainian moves were classy in some ways. However, I do not like the idea of permanently closing the door with negotiations with Russia, because if that also includes negotiating terms of surrender or peace terms with them in the future, meaning that the Russians officiate the Ukrainians regaining their land, I don't think that's a good approach, because that means that this war could literally last forever, even if the Russians are pushed across the border and then the war largely subsides. The Ukrainians won't have any official means at that point to end the war. It'll technically be going on forever, much like the war in between North Korea and South Korea, which still flares up every once in a while. And so, with that in mind, all of those moves were pretty good. It's just that one, if it extends in that direction like I'm thinking, I don't necessarily think it's not the best, I guess you could say, thing to do. But also, moving on into the next bit, it is interesting to hear that apparently the Canadians have now held a referendum to see if they want to annex the Russian embassy. And let's see about what that Russian embassy looks like. Russian embassy, Canada. Now, let's see. This is in Ottawa. When you see the embassy of Russia right here, let's drop down on Street View. I find it funny enough that in Ottawa, there's just people living next door to the Russian embassy. And it also looks like there's some kind of a demonstrator out here. When was this taken? 2012. And people were already against Russia in Canada about what they were doing in Syria, which had just started at this point historically, just like months ago, maybe like 2 or 3 months ago. And they were already getting people riled up over that. And we can see here that they have a little bulletin out front with Russian crap on it. And that's just weird. It's honestly just in a normal part of town. It's not like an embassy row or anything. And also kind of an ugly building, to be honest with you. Like, what the hell are these windows supposed to be? I don't know. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And thank you so much once again for the support. And also, very interesting, Santiago, that they said no to annexing the embassy of Russia. It must have been a fairly held poll for the answer to be that. It's a very Canadian answer, to say the least. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, folks, and also real quick, in the live chat, we do not have domestic politics in our chat. It gets all in the way of our news about Ukraine and Russia. So when we say we don't want politics, we do not want partisan Republican versus Democrat type chat going on in the live chat. So if you could please refrain from doing that, or otherwise I will have to time you out. I see a couple people not liking the rule, but that is the rule nonetheless. So moving on to our next super chat, we have a $50 donation from Magic Sky Girl, whose birthday it was yesterday. So happy birthday. And says, say as Mike Tyson. So she wants you to read this one off as Mike Tyson.
All right. So Let's see. We're about to do it. I'm sorry to everyone who doesn't like the voice. There's a decent amount of people who do. And of course, it was Magic Sky Girl's birthday yesterday. And I actually saw that she said in the live chat earlier that it wasn't her birthday. I don't know at this point. I'm still going to go with it was your birthday. So we're going to read this off. So Magic Sky Girl, have a special birthday with 7 cupcakes and 6 specially designed cakes to sweeten your day so much that you fall into sugar oblivion because you deserve that sweet send-off from the super stream. And so with that, you threw in as many asses as you can, and I hope you enjoyed that because we haven't whipped out Mike Tyson in the longest time. And of course, now Kissogram says, now kiss. And of course, Mike Tyson loves kisses. Kisses are the best thing to Mike Tyson. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support, Magic Sky Girl, and a happy belated birthday to you, because of course, everybody loves birthdays, and everybody loves 7 cupcakes and 6 specially designed cakes to sweeten your day so much that you're so under sugar oblivion. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again.
All right, and on to our next one. We have a $20 super chat from Psyops, who is back once again, and it's good to see you, Psyops. He says, no politics, eh? Muhahaha. Batman for president. Roosevelt did a good job with the WPA projects. The Bull Moose political party is the best party. Down with Whigs. The Three-Fifths compromise was horrible, and Texas stings. And Psyops, that was such a long time ago. The people that were alive then that really were like fervent about it, they're long gone, so that's fine.
And also, thank you for the support, Psyops. And also, that's not the kind of politics we talk about much. I really consider anything Lyndon B. Johnson administration forward, modern politics. And I know that actually goes back a pretty good ways. I was going to say Reagan era politics and forward is a little bit too modern, but when I actually thought about that in my head a while ago, like months ago, I was like, yeah, I mean, like, you know, like you could even go back further because, you know, you could say stuff about Jimmy Carter and Gerald R. Ford and all of those guys and George H.W. Bush. And so I was like, man, you gotta kind of extend that all the way back to there. But I will make an exception with Lyndon B. Johnson. Okay, I will. If you say something like Watergate was messed up, I don't really think anyone can disagree with that. I don't know of anyone who would defend what happened at Watergate. So Lyndon B. Johnson gets a pass. Well, not Lyndon B. Johnson. Richard Nixon gets a pass. But largely anything beyond Lyndon B. Johnson, we try and make sure that anything that modern in politics isn't covered. So you're good there. You can actually talk about all that. So, also, the whole Roosevelt thing with the WPA projects, that's interesting. But that's a rabbit hole for another time. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And of course, Psyops, you're out there trying to stir that pot and also throwing out the Texas stink comments. And so I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
All right. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Wesley, who says, Slava Ukraine.
And also, Wesley, Slava Ukraini. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
All right. And moving right along, we have a $20 super chat from Santiago Flores once again, who says, Pizzas and Donuts Fund, guys. Also, I believe that yesterday's video of the surrender of the BMP can serve as a propaganda and show that the Russians, they will not be shot if they surrender.
And also, thank you once again for the support, Santiago, to the coffee and, well, the donut and pizza fund. And also, the other thing, I think that does serve as a good video, kind of like a training video to the Russians, like the ones you get at, like, a grocery store when you start working there. Of course, Matthew and me know them. We have worked there before. Okay, we're going to have you sit down and watch a couple of training videos, and then you watch them. Welcome to Publix Supermarkets, the best employer in the United States. We employ over 10,000 people under the name of Mr. George. Mr. George gave life to the earth. The book of what would they call it? The book of produce. And the 7 days that it took for the green eggs to make their way to the produce section, he said, let there be light. And the store lights, you know, yeah, we all know the training videos. And I think that would be like the training video to the Russians of how to surrender, and also show them, at least in that instance, because it did look somewhat real, and a lot of people have given very convincing points about why it was real. And so I do think that that would serve a pretty good training video to the other Russians as to how they can surrender and what it will end up being like. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And also, thank you so much once again for the support. Real quick, Matthew, Thorne actually asks, what is WPA? Well, that's a great question. If you're not from the United States, you've probably never heard of it. And if you are in the United States, you may have not heard of it either. The WPA was FDR's programs to get people back to work. The Great Depression, he was a president that came in right after Hoover. And of course, the Great Depression happened under Hoover. And the public sentiment was that Hoover wasn't really doing enough to get it fixed. So when FDR came to office, he came in with this thing called the New Deal. And under it was this thing called the WPA. The WPA largely just talked about, I forgot the exact thing. It's like worker something. What does WPA stand for? Got to make sure. The Works Progress Administration. It did have something to do with work and administration. I didn't know what the P stood for. Anyways, it created all of these public works projects. It was one of the main reasons why the entire state of Alabama now is a forest. In case y'all didn't know, almost the entire state of Alabama before the WPAs came around had been deforested. There was really no trees left in Alabama that were standing. I mean, almost all of them had been clear cut. It's also the reason the TVA exists, the Tennessee Valley Authority, along with a whole bunch of other, like, they call them alphabet organizations, but largely all of them, and their purpose was to get unemployed Americans jobs, pay them to do something, and hopefully stimulate the economy in the meantime. It was doing its job okay, but the major kickoff to what really made these things just, I guess you could say, shoot through the roof was the Second World War, which really helped to kickstart America's economy again. Although you can definitely not say that the WPAs didn't do something in that process of trying to help out the American economy. And so with that, I hope that answers your question fairly well. If you're not from the United States, that's a little bit of our, I guess you could say, more modern 20th century history of what happened before World War II. And also, those things, if you don't know, they actually defined a lot of Southern culture from there forward. You'll see a lot of WPA stuff referenced in old not old songs, but songs talking about older times in the South, like the Song of the South. You'll hear them talk about he got a job, I think, with a TVA, and he bought a washing machine and a Chevrolet or something. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and next up, we have a $20 super chat once again from Wesley, who says, if Russia uses nukes in Ukraine, will NATO join the war directly? And real quick, Wesley, I have to say that before I said that we're going to sit back and do nothing, most likely, but with the more recent comments, I would be kind of a little bit pressed to say that that's still going to be the case. I think we actually might do so. But Enforcer, what is your take?
And do so with what again?
Let's see here. NATO joining the war if Russia uses nukes in Ukraine.
It almost seems a certainty at this point, especially with the threats that are being thrown out. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And I thank you so much once again for the support and also helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And next up, we have a $20 super chat from David Colley, who says, new Russian training system, camp out for a week, learn to forage and steal, train riding. Welcome to the front. Good stream, guys.
Thank you for the support. And also, I guess that would be a great synopsis of how the entire, I guess you could say, Russian training works. They really don't get any. I guess it's just kind of, I would almost say that at this point, it's like one of those video games that you get dropped off in without a tutorial, or any job that you get and they don't really teach you how to do it. I would have to say at this point, that's really what the Russians are facing. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and also a pretty good comment. I think that was a pretty good joke, and it has a decent amount of truth in it too. And so with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you so much once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Justice Ryan, who says, Enforcer and Matt, did you hear the news that 2 Russian soldiers who didn't want to fight were stopped near Alaska asking for asylum? And would the U.S. grant asylum to many other Russians if they asked for it?
We did hear about that. How did they make it all the way to Alaska? I have no idea.
Can't you just walk across right now?
No.
Or it's not that time of year.
I don't think that time of year is any time of year. The land.
I think there's like an ice bridge or something that forms in the winter, right?
Can you walk from Russia to Alaska? Let's find out. The stretch of water between those islands is only about 2.5 miles wide and actually freezes over during the winter, so you could technically walk from Russia to the U.S. on this seasonal sea ice. I don't think it's that time of year, and I'm guessing it's these 2 islands, the Big Diomede and the Little Diomede. I guess they're like 2.5 miles apart. Let's find out. So these are the only islands I could actually think about. So yeah, that's it. But then again, the problem with that is that this is a lighthouse, it seems. Some kind of a lighthouse post. And then over here, there's nothing on this island. Wow, is that a glacier? Yeah, that's apparently
That's
the
a glacier.
glacier. I know that someone's about to say, "Oh my God, you mispronounced it." I'm sorry, we pronounce things certain ways in the South. But this looks like a piece of the satellite imagery that was taken in the winter when the water had frozen over. And it does look passable. You could actually walk from one side to the other. There's also a crashed plane here, and an LI-2. It's that crashed DC-3, Matthew, and also a dog.
Oh, look, a dog.
that's not an LI-2. But anyways, with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well. I don't know how they even made it there, but I do think the United States would most likely grant them asylum, and if other Russians try to attempt the same thing, they would most likely grant them asylum as well. And so with that, I don't know why the map keeps throwing me around. I hope that answers the question fairly well, and thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from Slava Ukraine, who says, after seeing that artillery shell, I was looking on the Sign My Rocket website and found we could get Leaf Spring Army painted on an M777 for $5,000. How cool would it see? LSA in random video we view here. And I actually think I know who this is that put this in.
And that is an interesting idea. We are thinking about it, but due to the limitations, we wouldn't be able to pay for it ourselves because, we got to make sure to save up for college tuition, and we can't run a fundraiser on this channel for Sign My Rocket because they aren't registered under the GuideStar program. So due to that limitation, I don't think we'd be able to do that because that's just getting a little bit too big ticket. But still, it is an interesting idea. And so with that, I thank you for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $20 super chat from MG Monkey, who says, donating to say thanks. But Darian Manomer solved the plate, saying the plate tag in the Breaking Bad movie. It's a replica movie prop. Someone in Alaska registered the same plate to the Cherokee.
Oh, okay, interesting. Now, that's one thing I do know a little bit is Breaking Bad. I just know that there's this guy who says the B word constantly in the show or whatever it is, and then there's some guy that wears a fedora and he's always going, Jesse, or something like that. I don't know. That's all I know about the show. That's it. So, I'm sorry it's not impressive knowledge, but I thank you for the support. I thank you for letting us know about that, and apparently there's some guy in the tank that's going to pop out and go, Jesse. Oh, wait, hang on, let me do it right. Jesse. We need to make more meth or something like that. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And thank you for providing us with that information. Because it's good to know that that actually has a reason and a meaning behind it. And so with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Rob Bertram, who says, that motorcycle with sidecar could be the one that Denis Davydiv donated to the UAF a couple of months ago. I doubt there's many of those in service on the front lines, but there's no way to know unless Dennis could confirm.
Well, I thank you for the support, but of course, I'm not exactly sure about that. There's probably a lot of motorcycles out there in use. A lot of countries do still have motorcycles that are in somewhat of, I guess you could say, continuous service. If we look at U.S. motorcycles, I'm pretty sure, U.S. military motorcycles, I'm sure that we probably have a few. Or maybe not. Maybe the only ones we had were, well, no, yeah, there is actually some. There's the Davidson. Is this it? Is this what we use now?
Wait a minute. Which one is that? Let's see the picture again. Wow, that's actually pretty cool looking, I gotta say.
It is pretty cool. It kind of looks like a dirt bike.
I think it is a dirt bike.
Let's see. In 2013, the U.S. military adopted the 0MMX motorcycle for Special Operation Forces use around the globe. Interesting. And it's a silent all-electric motor that can still put 54 horsepower with 68 foot-pounds of torque. And can run for more than 3,500 hours on a single charge. Wow, that is something, actually. Dang. And some Harley Davidson. Wait a minute, hang on. Nope, that's actually the one that it replaced. Wait, no.
that was replacing the horse.
Correction. I'm very sorry, everyone. I was misreading this. The Harley Davidson Model 17F/J was actually used to chase down Pancho Villa, which would have been in the late 1910s. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well, but then again, I'm not entirely sure. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and up next, we have a $15 super chat from Eli Lassetti, who says, "Look, Mom, they're reading my comment, LSA."
And I thank you for the support. And we did read off the comment. And so, Mom, if you're watching, he did get his comment read off. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right, and we also have a $15 super chat from BR Bowden, who says, "Are those captured tanks equipped with both Ukrainian stolen toilets and washer machines? Maybe that become a new Russian model TW, toilet and washer machine."
The T-70B TW. No, the T-72B3 TW. That actually wouldn't be that bad. We're going to start adding that abbreviation. Well, I can't guarantee it, but we will start adding that to some of them, because I think that may be included in the capture of every Russian main battle tank is a toilet and washing machine. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And of course, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support, and also an interesting idea.
All right, and also real quick to go over a poll that I just threw up, actually. The question was, would you walk across the ice bridge from Russia to Alaska as a Russian citizen seeking asylum? And also, real quick, Enforcer, we did just pull up that the ice bridge is a real thing, right?
As far as I could tell, it was in between these two islands.
Because I know I've seen a video of somebody actually walking across it at one point on YouTube.
All right, so how long does it take to walk from Russia to Alaska? There are 2 reported cases of humans walking from Alaska to Russia in modern history. The last was Carl Bushby and his American companion, Dmitry Kiefer, who in 2006 walked from Alaska to Russia over the Bering Strait in 14 days, or 2 weeks, or a fortnight.
Oh, wait, Enforcer, now that top article up there is actually from, it looks like alaskacenters.gov, so that's the government. It says you can technically walk across it. Because it's 2.5 miles wide. So that's the actual government saying it exists.
Yes, that is actually the Alaskan government telling you all that the ice bridge does exist, and you can walk across it at certain times of the year on seasonal ice. And so with that, I hope that answers the question, because everyone's...
And we still got to go over the poll. The results were 67% said, yeah, no question about it, I would walk across the ice bridge, and 33% said, nah, I'll pass, thanks.
Nah, I'll pass. Thanks. I would have to say I would actually have to cross it. I like that second option though; it's funny sounding. And you know what's interesting to me, Matthew? I just saw someone say that this is BS. How in the world can you actually call the Alaska Public Land Information Center, an official government website, BS when they're telling you an answer? That's like going to Yellowstone. That's like wait a minute, hang on. That's like going to Yellowstone Park and asking a park ranger, "Are there bears here?" And then he goes, "Yes, there are." And you just say, "Bullshit." It's like, you can't say that to them. That's their job to know this.
Although, it seems like a lot of people are saying that.
I gotta tell you, if you go to a government website and they say something like this, and their partners are the National Park Service and the U.S. Forest Service, and also the United States Geological Survey, I would have to say they got a lot of validity behind them, because these organizations do know what they're talking about. And so there is, in between those 2 islands at least, enough ice in the winter to walk across from one Diomede to the other. And so with that, and you can you can even see it here. You can even see it right there. Here's part of the winter photography that was taken by a satellite of the ice that had frozen over, and you can see it clearly here from the big Diomede, and it goes all the way over to the little one. So with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and next up, we have a $20 super chat from William Allen, who says, discuss events from the point your birthing human raised you to understand politics and their effects. LBJ and others since created lots of problems. I think that might be a little too political, William.
But real quick, could you read it off?
He says, this war an effect of politics since LBJ.
So to answer that, can you go back and reread the whole thing in its entirety real quick?
He says, discuss events from the point your birthing human raised you to understand politics and their effects. LBJ and others since created lots of problems Americans deal with today. This war and effect of politics since LBJ.
All right, and so to answer that, my parents actually didn't really have a lot with my political upbringing. Very seldomly it ever occurred. I largely got my own, I guess you could say, political, well, not really political, the absence of political sides that I make sure to enforce on this channel through really just my own upbringing in terms of what I found and what my opinion is. So with that, that's the reason. Well, and also another thing, Lyndon B. Johnson, I guess you could say, really started off modern American politics. You know, you could say that JFK was the one who conducted the party switch, where I guess you could say Democrat ideals became Republican ideals, and Republican ideals became Democrat ideals, which did happen. But beyond him, he wasn't really around long enough to really do anything. Rather than that, he kind of switched them around, but that was it. Lyndon B. Johnson and thereforward, they started to enact political policies that do affect the modern Americans to the modern day, and that's why I say that political topics and comments from Lyndon B. Johnson's administration forward are not really allowed on this channel, because of course we are here to support Ukraine, and we're not really here to talk about American politics. Then we kind of water down what this stream is about, which is about the Ukraine war, and it starts to become every other political commentary channel there is out there, and there's way too many of them. And so that's why we made that rule. And that's also why it goes back that far, is because that's about the time that you could make a very contentious and heated argument about modern politics over. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and thank you so much once again for the support, William Allen. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and next up we have a $15 super chat from Jonathan Toe, who says, do you think Elon Musk has fallen for Russian propaganda, or is he genuinely trying to save lives?
Can you reread that again?
He says, do you think Elon Musk has fallen for Russian propaganda, or is he genuinely trying to save lives?
I would have to say that Elon probably isn't falling for Russian propaganda. He's probably trying to save lives. I honestly don't think that's the best way to go about it, is the options he's giving, because they're just appeasement, and we all know what we think about appeasement here on this channel. But I think that Elon's attempt there was a poorly placed attempt at trying to save lives, but it didn't really come over well to anyone, really. And so with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, and I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Jonathan Stevens, who does not leave a comment. But thank you very much, Jonathan, for your support, and we do appreciate it very much. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Superbunker 9000, who were paid a visit by NAFO, who says, best looking tank is the one being towed by Ukrainian tractor. And yes, completely.
And I would agree. I'd have to say the best way a Russian tank is transported is by the farmer. And of course, those things are just coming around for harvest season, which is about this time of year for some crops. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And also, real quick, if we could try and slow down the Elon talk in the live chat. I try and give everyone a decent amount of leeway and room, regardless of what they do. It's the polite and more diplomatic thing to do. And I would like that we don't start making the whole thing like a crapping on Elon thing. I will leave my opinions about Elon out of it, but I generally try and give people in the public sector the benefit of the doubt and say that hopefully they were trying to do the best thing that they thought was possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and I hope y'all all understand where I'm coming from.
All right, and up next, we have another $20 super chat from William Allen, who says, I love challenging this history major. He is awesome.
And thank you so much for the support, William Allen. And of course, thank you so much for saying I'm awesome. I don't know everything about history. I'm sure that in a decent amount of categories, you may know more than me, and you've actually shown that you definitely do know more than me in some categories. But I do thank you so much for the support, and so much for posing interesting questions that are fairly good, actually. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. And also, real quick, to move back into the live chats real quick and address this. The whole thing about and someone just said Elon apologized. No. Let me tell you how this is. If this was Elon, Bill Gates, whoever it is, one thing is almost always a certainty, that actors and incredibly successful businessmen almost always step out of their realm when it comes to politics or anything beyond their profession. Suffice it to say, a lot of people don't really know much beyond their profession. Like, for example, Elon, in my opinion, doesn't really know a lot about how, I guess you could say, politics works worldwide. He knows an incredibly good amount about business. You know, you don't become the richest man in the world by being an idiot, you know. But at the same time, that is also applied to me. I know a decent bit about the military, by and large, as I guess you could say, a topic and how it works. But I wouldn't know a massive deal about engineering and things that Elon has done quite well at, nor would I know a lot about Bill Gates and his knowledge, I guess you could say, in the computing sector, although you could say he doesn't really know a lot about politics or really anything beyond that certain group for that matter. And that's why I give, I guess you could say, those people a good bit of leeway, because they're always going out there and thinking that they are acting on great intentions, and they're largely just guided by thinking I'm successful in this one category, so hopefully I can be successful in this category with what I say. Although, you know, of course, doesn't always end out that way, but usually try and give them the benefit of the doubt. There's no reason to go and beat any of them into the ground over this stuff. Just go, hey, that wasn't really that great of a comment, and then just move on from it. And what was that, Matthew?
So I saw someone in the live chat saying addressing a public figure by their first name is absurd. Shame on you. But he goes by Elon Musk, though. Everybody calls him Elon.
That's just goofy.
I'm not understanding the motivation behind saying that.
I don't even get it. Like, what? From now on, everyone's going to have to call me Grand Lord Inquisitor, Guardian of the Realm, the Enforcer, or something, since we're going off of these kinds of naming conventions. It's the United States. You call them whatever you want. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Big Tex, who says, I hereby endow a fund so you and Matt can do reaction videos to the Lord of the Rings movies. The crowd has spoken.
And thank you for the support. And we will check out the Lord of the Rings movies. I gotta be honest with y'all, though. One thing that I found is that for some reason I have like a physical revulsion to fiction. And it's not that fiction is terrible, but for some reason, with how I grew up mentally in my head, fictional content is really hard for me to consume. Like, I can't really sit down and watch it. I haven't really I like Star Trek, Star Wars. I all find it kind of odd, you know, like even like going towards like, I guess you could say like fantasy with like elves or something in it. I don't know. For some reason, I've just never been able to process it. I almost always have to process things in a more non-fictional, realistic setting. But with that, I hope that does address the comment, and I will go and check out that movie. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Michael Cabrera, who says, I sent this last week after the super chat cutoff. Enforcer Matt sounds like Jamie from Mythbusters. Not a bad thing. And let me see if I can remember it. What was the other guy's name first? Was it Adam?
Yeah, Jamie and Adam, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Adam, let's go blow this car up outside, okay? With that mustache, like, moving around weirdly.
Yeah, he had a massive mustache. But yeah, he kind of does sound like it. I kind of do see it. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Taras Kulik, who actually put the pronunciation in his live chat. Thank you very much for that. He says, Slava Ukraine. The name always trips you up, and yes, it does. And thanks for what you guys do.
And thank you so much, Taras Kulik, for the support. I'm glad that you put that in there for me, too. And thank you so much for the kind words. It does help us out massively. And, of course, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
All right. Yes, indeed. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from William Allen, who says, would Andrew be okay to address you? That's my youngest name.
And also, William, it would be okay to address me as Andrew. I do like the Enforcer. For some reason, like even in college, the Enforcers really started to stick. And and I'm almost, for some reason, it feels like my actual name has almost gone dormant in my head. Like someone could say Andrew, and I would most likely respond to the Enforcer quicker than I would Andrew at this point. Really, it doesn't matter to me either way. I do think the Enforcer, though, keeps with the stage name of the channel, kind of like Mr. Beast. You know, like, you don't see a lot of, like, and I know that a lot of people may not know who Mr. Beast is, but you don't see a lot of people calling him Jimmy, and you also don't see a lot of people calling other YouTubers by their first name. They're usually called, like, the crazy, like, you know, like, FPS. What are some channels? I'm trying to think of them, Matthew.
Like, what type of channels?
Just like any channel that has, like, kind of like a stage name thing to it.
FPS Russia. The guy's name is Kyle, I think.
Yeah, you know, stuff like that. You know, you got channel names, and they just kind of become the YouTuber's name. So in that way, it's okay to call me Andrew, but due to the Enforcer being the name of the channel and kind of who I guess you could say, pen named myself as on the channel, it's probably more so towards the direction of the Enforcer, but either one's fine. I'm not going to make a big deal out of either. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and thank you very much, Mr. Enforcer, for that. And moving on to Mr. Michael Cabrera's chat, he puts in a $10 donation from, actually, $10 donation that says Slava Ukraine and Slava Mike Tyson.
And Slava Ukraine and Slava Mike Tyson. And some people said that my voice is a little bit low tonight, and that's because you don't feel my pain. And also the other thing, I watched the Joe Rogan podcast the other day because I was trying to listen to it again and see if it made any sense. And he was older, and he was talking in a lot lower voice, and so that inspired my impression today. And so with that, also another thing, if any of y'all have ever watched the Joe Rogan show, have y'all ever noticed that he brings up like psychedelics and chimps in every single episode? Like those are the two main topics of a show. Like I don't even get it. I'm like, what in the world? Like, he brought that up in the first one I was in, and then that one he brought it up in too. I was like, is this like a running theme of his channel is psychedelics and chimpanzees? But with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you once again.
All right, and next up, big shout out to Red Lobster Dumpster Fire for putting in a $5 donation. Very interesting username. I think that's the first time they've supported us, so thank you very much for that. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Cade Riddle, who says, "Here we go."
And thank you so much for the support, Cade Riddle. And here we went, and here we are, 2 hours and 33 minutes in stream. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. And also, a lot of people are saying that Joe Rogan, let's see, you know, Joe Rogan talks about nonsense and stuff. Some people say he's political, and I will say he is a little political. I, of course, don't really get into the political side of things. I just have tried to listen to his show a little, but I gotta be honest with y'all. Some of y'all said that his show wasn't really that interesting, and his show really is marketed kind of as just like literally a talking show. Like, they just talk about whatever comes to mind. And I gotta be honest, it was interesting the first time I watched it because if y'all don't know, Joe Rogan was a comedian at one time, and he was talking to another comedian about the industry of being a comedian. So that was interesting. But the second one with Mike Tyson, it just felt like it just wandered without purpose. And I usually like to watch like shows and stuff that actually have like a goal and an aim in their conversations. So I didn't really like the second one. But I did find the first one interesting because it was almost entirely about the industry of the comedians. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, because I can see some people do not like Joe Rogan and some people do like Joe Rogan. I don't really get into all of the political side of things, but at least the first show I watched was interesting. The second one, not really so much. But with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have another super chat from William Allen, who puts in a $10 donation this time and says, "Okay, I will only call you Andrew on the Discord. You can call me Cyber Aggie. Whoop, got to get up early. Good night."
And good night, William Allen. And of course, thank you so much for the support. And if you want to call me Andrew on the Discord or in a call, feel free to. It doesn't really matter to me, but I thank you so much for the support. And also, it's good to know who was calling me in the middle of sleeping like 2 or 3 days ago. Like, you called me like 4 times and I was asleep. And like, I was sitting there in my bed asleep, and I woke up and I heard, and I looked over at my phone, and you were calling me, and I was like, what in the world? But with that, thank you once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and next up, we have a $5 super chat from Nikolai Beltov, who says, "Bye bye, Raktar."
Bye, Raktar. And of course, thank you so much for the support. And the Bayraktar song is a classic that will be on this channel probably forever and will stay around. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
And next up, we have another one from Nikolai, who says, Enforcer, they call it a camera, like a photo camera.
Wait, was it actually written like that?
Yes.
Huh. Well, I don't know of any photo cameras that look like that. You know, it's kind of a weird one, but I thank you for the support, and I'm glad to know it's a photo camera if it is one. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And next up, we have a $15 super chat from Joshua Chambers, who says, it began with Putin on the Blitz, and it'll end with Crimea River. Oh, wow. That's good. I like that.
Yeah. Oh, man. It's a good one. And also, thank you for the support. And that is two of the best puns I've ever heard. Oh, my gosh.
Joshua, you get the award because that's one of the most clever super chats I've ever seen. So credit to you for that one.
And also, I do thank you so much for the support, Joshua. And that was a clever one. I mean, that was over the top. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one. Also, real quick, once again to address this, I've seen some people talking about some stuff about the Joe Rogan show. I will add this in real quick as a comment. I'm totally fine with people having interests of any kind and any take. Due to me not taking a openly public political side, whatever you're doing, as long as you aren't hurting other people, I'm fine with it. But one thing I find weird is when people put a little bit too much faith into one thing, and Joe Rogan does that with psychedelics and drugs. And he just like both shows I watched, he acted like that was the wonderment category, like it was just a key to the next world, like you just ascended to the next plane because you ate a shroom or smoked pot. And if you do that, you do that. But to act like that is literally just like a saving grace or something. Like I think at one point he even said that the only reason that and this was a little interesting, you might find this comment interesting. He said the only reason in one of the shows that humans had evolved to understand the things we do now is because they just took so many drugs way back when.
How was that even possible, though?
I don't even know. I don't even know how that would actually be possible. But
I gotta say, Enforcer, I'm really not politically speaking, just overall. I used to listen to the guy's podcast, but the more I listened to it, I was like, I don't think I really like this guy after all. I don't know what it is about him. It's just something I don't like.
I don't know. You watch one show, and when you watch one show, you're like, okay, maybe it's a little interesting. And then when I watched the second one, I was like, I don't think I'm going to return to this. I don't know. I mean, there are people out there who find him interesting. He's got a big audience. You can't lie about that. But I don't know. I mean, I guess he just didn't really end up being the guy for me. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And I hope that addresses that again, because I saw some people talking about it, and I'm going to just leave it at that. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
All right. And next up, we have a $5 super chat from Igor, who says, how many Ukrainians does it take to recover a tank? 3. My version, 1 to recover, another to watch and laugh, and 1 to film the whole thing.
That's actually pretty good. And I think that is about the breakdown. There's 1 to recover, 1 to watch, and 1 to film. And we actually saw that in that video where they recovered the one from the bluff. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And I thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from James Lish, who does not leave a comment, but thank you very much, James, for the support. And moving right along, we have a $5 super chat from Nigel Curtis, who says, can anybody explain to me what the United Nations is doing to stop the invasion? I suspect not.
And I thank you for the support, helping out the channel. And the answer is the United Nations is doing nothing. And we actually went into a little bit of a deep dive on this on the channel before, and we found out that Russia is a permanent member of the United Nations, and they're also one of the few nations on the Security Council that has veto power. And so if all 4 out of the 5 members in the United Nations vote on agreement on something, all the Russians have to do is veto it, and it can't be done. So that's why the United Nations probably hasn't done anything, because whenever these 5 members on the Security Council vote for something, all 4 of them could vote the same way, but as long as the Russians veto it, the UN is completely powerless to do anything. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and that is why the UN is largely doing nothing. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right. And next up, we have a $5 super chat from Noisy Cricket, who says, thanks for the hard work that you guys put in.
And thank you so much for the support, and thank you for enjoying this channel. We try our best to make sure that the news is informational, and of course, I guess you could say very rich in content, and that it is interesting to watch. Some people can cover some people do cover the news, but they don't make it the most interesting thing to watch. And of course, I don't want y'all to be bored to death while trying to get y'all's news for the day. And so with that, I thank you so much once again. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Squamous Amos, who says, I think y'all would love reading Lord of the Rings trilogy, great bridge to fantasy for those who like nonfiction, also where orc reference comes from.
And I thank you for the support, and I do know that the orc reference comes from there, but I haven't really gotten into it much, and also due to the amount of time I have, I hardly have time to read anything, and so I don't think I'd be able to read the books, but I could probably try and watch the movies. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Craig Platel, who says USMS M1 tankers had no trouble operating T-72s after DS/DS.
And that's an interesting comment. I think he's talking about Desert Storm and Desert Shield. And that's interesting to know. I didn't know that the Americans at some point were operating Iraqi tanks or similar, trying to figure out how they work, I guess, or, well, not how they work, but just trying to move them around. But that is actually interesting to hear, and I thank you so much for sharing that with us, so that way we can know. Also, let's look down here. Oh my god, wow. I was wondering what this was. I haven't really looked at Iraq all too much, but it looks like they've almost nearly developed every single area that there can be in the Tigris and Euphrates Valley, which is really interesting. Also, I just saw Fallujah up here, and of course y'all know that Fallujah was one of the hardest fought battles in, I guess you could say, all of Iraq. But interesting. Really interesting.
You know, Enforcer, I went to Iraq once.
When?
It was a long time ago, but I ran.
Oh my god. Get out of here.
That was horrible.
All right, and so that we are on to the next one.
And next up, after everybody recovers from cringing, we have a $5 super chat from Shaheem B, who says, hey guys, did y'all see the video of the Ukrainians fly the Apache helicopter? Also, how do I join your live chats?
And I thank you for the support. And to answer that question, you should be able to join the live chat if you're subscribed. If not, I don't know what would be happening. You might want to create a new account. And also, I have not seen the video of the Ukrainians flying the Apache, but we will be on the lookout for it. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $3 super chat from Neri Oliveira, who says, hello from Brazil. And just out of curiosity, does a hit like on that on tank usually kill the whole crew? Wait a minute, hold on. I think I butchered that. Just out of curiosity, does a hit like that on a tank usually kill the whole crew?
I don't know which video you're talking about specifically, but if you ever see a shot penetrate the cab and the hatches were closed and then the hatches pop open and some kind of a smoke is coming from the cabin, usually that means that overpressure occurred and that can kill the crew. We're not, of course, that isn't always the case, but that is usually the case. And so with that, I hope that answers the question the best we can, and I thank you so much once again for the support. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, a big shout out to Dupper Bob for putting in a $2 donation, and thank you very much for your support. And then we have a $3 super chat from Don Valdo, who says, I know it's not much, but I hope it's enough for 2 coffees for the lads before your future lectures. Futuristic gun from last night is EDM4S, Lithuanian made.
And I thank you so much for the support, and I thank you for giving us a little bit more support to the coffee fund. Could you reread that last part, Matthew?
Futuristic gun from last night is EDM4S, Lithuanian made.
EDM4S. Gun. Ah, yes, the gun. It's the Lithuanian anti-drone gun. These things are cool. They look really neat. Honestly, they look like something sci-fi, and it's good to know that they do work. Also, we can see a really cool picture here as they're aiming one. Wait a minute. Hang on, has this thing been around for a while?
They call it a sky wiper.
Oh, look, it's me. Let's see, in 2019, they made one. So these things have actually been around for a bit. But with that, I hope that addresses the comment. And thank you very much for letting us know that. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And for our final super chat for the moment, we have a $2 super chat from Mr. Lunchtime, who throws in some lunch money once again and says, 4 stars coffee, stay toasty, my friends.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support once again. And we are going to enjoy that 4-star coffee. And thank you so much once again for enjoying this channel and throwing in some kind words as well. And so with that,
Did you say 4 stars coffee?
4-star coffee.
Oh, I thought you said 4 stars coffee. I was like, what kind of coffee is that?
That's that off-brand Starbucks coffee. But with that, we are now going to be moving out of the super chats and on into live chats. And we're going to be, and also, real quick, everyone, I know that usually the normal stream goes on for 3 hours and 30 minutes or 3 hours and 15 minutes, but tonight I'm sensing opportunity for Matthew and me to get a little bit of extra sleep. So we're going to answer any of the live chats that come in for the next 15 minutes, and we're going to be, well, actually, we're going to be answering any of the super chats that come in within the next 15 to 14 minutes at this point, and also as many live chats as we can. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from David Colley, who says, U.S. struck Syria with missile, killing ISIS leader, or pinning Russian anti-air in Syria.
And I thank you for the support, and I don't know about that specific strike yet, so sadly I'm going to have to declare ignorance on that, because I don't really know what their specific aims were or what that has done yet. Also, I thought that ISIS was practically dead at this point, and apparently they're still out there, probably as a shadow of their former selves. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and thank you so much once again for the support, David.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Bo Williams, who says, other than nuclear and hypersonics, how many weapons, guided and or smart, do you estimate that Russia has left?
Oh, man, both you and David asked questions that I really can't answer all too well. We don't really know, because if we're talking about guided ammunition for artillery or unguided ammunition, there's really no way to know the exact number. Though the unguided ammunition is actually quite easy to produce, and so they could continuously produce that and also build up the numbers of that they have in storage. But then again, they're probably not. But then again, guided ammunition, it's very hard to get numbers on this sort of stuff because it's manufactured in such mass, and usually those numbers aren't really made exactly public all too well. We don't really have a good idea as to how many, I guess you could say, shells the Russians really have. But one thing I can tell you is that it does seem like they're running out of a decent amount of their ammunition for most of their weapons, except for their artillery, which still continues to lay down almost the same amount of fire that they would have months ago. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and I hope we answer that fairly well.
All right, and up next, we have a $2 super chat from Anthony. And Anthony, I thought you had gotten off for the night, but he's back once again. He says, can we check the Russian casualty?
And we can check out on the Russian casualty, and he's still dead. I'm just kidding. We're going to go to Twitter, and we're going to go check on the casualty report. Of course, we use the Kyiv Independent for casualty reports. I find them to be a very reliable source, a very consistent one. They post them daily. Here we go. Oh my lord. 61,330 troops dead. 2,449 tanks destroyed. 5,064 armored personnel carriers destroyed. 1,424 artillery units destroyed, 344 MLRSs, 177 anti-aircraft vehicles, 266 planes, 232 helicopters, 15 boats, 1,047 UAVs, 134 special equipment vehicles, 3,854 supply vehicles, almost the entirety of what they went into Ukraine with, and 246 cruise missiles. And so with that, I hope that addresses the super chat fairly well. And thank you so much once again, Anthony, for the support. And welcome back for the short moment. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have another $10 super chat from William Allen, who says, well, I was going to bed until Crimea River came up. That was awesome. Here's some money, just because.
And I thank you for the support, William Allen. And I'm glad you did enjoy that pretty good joke, because that was a genius one, for sure. And so with that, I thank you so much once again. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Narmar, who says, anyone want my Siberian Husky? You can't trust them. JK, Slava Ukraine. And Narmar, I don't want the Siberian Husky because those things don't stay in pens and they don't stay in like enclosures. They climb out of everything.
Siberian Huskies are a little wild. We actually... Wait a second. Sorry.
What in the world?
I'm sorry. I yawned. And so I'm about to get hell on earth from Matthew after stream and also my mother if she's watching because they both... Oh, don't yawn! No, I'm sorry. I can't help it. I'm drinking coffee as much as I can. I'm almost overdosing these days and somehow it still happens. But to answer that, I wouldn't want a Siberian Husky. We used to have one as a kid, and it always killed animals and brought them back into the yard, and so it stank the place up, and we'd also have to deal with them, like pick them up with a shovel and carry them off. So I wouldn't want a Siberian Husky, but, there may be people out there that may want one. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and moving on to our next one here. Just make sure that was our last super chat, and that looks like it's the last one for the moment. So we're moving back to our live chats. We do have our 3 decoders of the stream, CFA, WFTU, and Mark Hodges, who have figured out the Morse code. They say it says, the Russians are losing more tanks by abandonment than they are being destroyed.
That is correct, and they are losing more tanks, it seems, at this point, from abandoning them than just outright being destroyed. And so with that, I think all 3 of y'all did. Was Ashley in that list?
Not tonight.
Oh man, I thought I heard Ashley in that list, but I thank all 3 of y'all so much for deciphering that Morse code, and of course, always being here and doing that nightly. It's not deciphering! But with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and next up, we have a live chat. My brain just left my mind there for a minute. From Alex Wolf, who says, did you see where the U.S. military is retiring the beloved Hellfire with the updated and better Jag-M?
What? What? Hellfire missile. Let's see. They're in service to the present. I'm so sorry, everyone. I'm so sorry. I don't mean to do that. I'm not bored or anything. It's just that I've been going nonstop today, and I am exhausted, and I'm trying to keep in with this. But let's see here. There was the Ginsu one right there, the kinetic warhead with the pop-out blades. Ooh, that's I don't know. That just seems odd. Anyways. Well, it's good to know that it's used by the majority of the world. That's good to know. But I can't find it. I'll trust you on that one because the Hellfire is getting a little old. And that's crazy, honestly. The Hellfire's been around forever. I remember when I was a kid, whenever they said anything, the Predator drone fires Hellfire missiles, and you'd watch that on the American History Channel at like 8 o'clock at night, and you'd be like, oh my god, a Hellfire! And you would know nothing about what it really did. It was just a cool name. But with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and that's crazy to hear. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a question from Jasper World Order, who says, how long till they have to bring out the Su-57? They must be low on planes.
It's most likely never going to be brought out. They only have about 4 of them, 4 to 16 of them from what I know, and I just don't think those numbers are large enough to ever try and field them without the fear of them being shot down. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Duncan VR, and he does not put in the boss. He says, when will Russia bring out the MiG-15s?
Very soon. And so that I hope that answers the question, Duncan. And it's odd to have a question from you that doesn't have animal noises in it. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and I hope we were able to answer that one fairly well.
And next up, we have a question from Thomas O'Hanlon, who says, Enforcer, what do you think is going to happen with the leader of China? He suddenly disappeared. But I think he came back, though.
I think he came back. Yes, I do think he came back. Let's go to China News. Let's see. So it looks like he's still there because they're still talking about his policies just 5 hours ago. And so with that, I hope that answers that question. It's a little bit of a short one, but I think he's still around and he's still kicking over there. I think he just disappeared out of the public eye for a short while, and then a tabloid came out, which made a whole bunch of people think that there was hope that there was going to be a government change, and then it didn't happen. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $3 super chat from Stefan R., who says, look up a Rapid Dragon, a new U.S. weapon, also attaching wing missiles to cargo planes, like they have a plan to use Hercules, etc., effectively.
And let's pull up that Rapid Dragon. Rapid Dragon. Missile system. I like how it says prosecute mission. Your Honor, I would like to bring this to exhibit. We can see a picture of it here. This is apparently how it'll work. So it's just a giant egg.
Wait a minute, what in the world?
It's a giant egg, and it drops off little bomblets that fly to their targets. Interesting. It appears to be in the development phase. Well, actually, it's been in service. It has had a successful test. But it appears that it has been used a large amount. And I don't know if this would be useful. But then again, I don't really know if they're designing a weapon like this to be used from these kind of aircraft. I'm assuming that it has some kind of niche that it will fill. So with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And thank you so much once again for the support. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from, let's see here, TDK, who says, Enforcer, aren't the Ukrainians going to be stuck on the other side when they have completely taken Kherson back?
Read that again.
Aren't the Ukrainians going to be stuck on the other side when they have completely taken Kherson back?
Yes, they will be, and it's a perfect situation. They pushed them off the northern banks of the Dnipro River back over to the south, and then the entirety of Ukraine that is, I guess you could say, west of the Dnipro will not have any Russian forces in it. So while it seems like it's not necessarily beneficial, there are other places that they could push into the south from. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and moving on to our next one, we have a question from Anthony, who says, Enforcer, have you or Enforcer Matt made any nuclear war preparations? I've got a few close places to hide from fallout and get a few supplies and equipment in a duffel bag. Is that weird?
I don't think it's weird, but we haven't made any preparations ourselves. If a nuclear weapon falls, I'm just willing to get a nice suntan and maybe a couple of years taken off my life, or maybe all of them taken off my life. And not really a lot of preparations, because if it happens, might as well just, suck it up and just take what happens. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment, and we are on to the next one.
And honestly, Anthony, this is kind of like maybe not a popular opinion, but if a nuke were to hit, I honestly would not want to live through it, to be totally honest, because the aftermath is going to be tremendous. And most likely, if nukes are flying around over here in the United States, the world's in pretty bad shape, and it's not going to get any better anytime soon. But that's just my take on it. But I can understand why you'd want to take preparations. I'm just not really sure, rather than going and hiding underground forever, what else you can really do to prepare for something like that.
And I got to be honest, adding on to that, if a nuclear weapon did fall near me and my area was subjected to any kind of damage at all, at that point, infrastructure would be destroyed so heavily in that area, it most likely wouldn't return for decades. So you would almost be living like a medieval peasant until something could be done. I would rather at that point be right under the direct blast and get vaporized instantly than have to live through the life of pretty much being a medieval peasant, and also what thousands of nuclear weapons will do to the atmosphere, because believe it or not, if they all blow up at one time, it's suspected that a lot of the layers in the atmosphere that protect us from deadly UV radiation from the sun would dissipate, and so a lot of people would start dying from cancers a lot faster than they do now, and cataracts would form in the eyes, pretty much making everyone blind unless you're wearing some kind of sunglasses or similar sort of eye protection. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Riley Beatty, who says, there's only 100 seconds to midnight. What are y'all's thoughts on that?
There are only how many seconds to midnight?
100. I guess he's referring to the like Commission on Atomic Scientists or something like that. You know, they have kind of like the gimmicky like atomic thing going on.
Yeah, that clock that just kind of arbitrarily changes its time just whenever for whatever. I've seen that clock change time so many times. I don't really put a lot of credit into that clock. Also, the other thing, if it was done off of scientific observations alone, I would put credit into it. But I've seen them change the clock just off of political stances, and that to me delegitimizes something. When you start, if it's I guess you could say a board conducted by scientists, and they're changing the clock based off of scientific calculations and things like that, I would believe it. But if you start trying to sway American policies politically with the clock, then it kind of loses its legitimacy to me, you see, because I stay politically neutral. Therefore, any organization out there, in my opinion, that does something like I do, like reporting the news or doing anything that they say is scientific, they should be morally neutral. There is no other reason to not be neutral. It doesn't make any sense to sit there and say we are an unbiased organization that covers like the news, states facts and information and stuff like that, and then you start going and doing things off of political biases regardless of what direction they're in. I don't feel that's right, and for that reason I don't put a lot of faith in that clock, because like an administration, a new administration could come through. For some reason, the scientists on the board, they're not really happy with that administration or their policies, and then they just start messing around with the clock. We're now 1 second from midnight or something like that. So I don't really trust it much. You know, it just changes on a dime, in my opinion. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and I think, Enforcer, I think this is our last one, isn't it?
It would be, because we're now running overtime. So who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
All right, and that viewer is Paul Benz, who says, does President Zelenskyy sound more of a diplomat today than he has in times past?
I think Zelenskyy, after these victories in the war currently, I think he's actually gotten a little bit more emboldened to be less diplomatic than he was at the start. Because we've actually seen them close down any possibility of negotiating anything with the Russians. And, that could, and a lot of people look at that as they're not willing to listen to Russia's terms of surrender. But at the same time, that means that the Ukrainians cannot approach the Russians, at least officially due to that stance, with their conditions for peace. And for that reason, I feel like he's moving more so into the concept of total victory instead of trying to find a diplomatic solution to the issue. Either way, they're winning. They're going to be retaking the land, even if it was through diplomatic means or actually retaking the land from the Russians by force. And regardless, I think that's still a pretty good thing. So with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And thank you, everyone, so much for watching this channel. This is the end of the stream for the night. If you have enjoyed, please make sure to slam that like button and also subscribe. Both of those things help us out, and if you hit the bell button, you get notified when these streams are live, which is every single day at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, except for Mondays. Thank you all so much once again for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the war in Ukraine. Thank you all once again, and I'll see you tomorrow. Good night, take care, and stay safe.